Find your seats if you would, please. Thank you for joining us at the work session for November. At this time, we will call the roll. Ms. Kinzer.
Ms. Parker? Here. Ms. Kinzer's here. Ms. Hopkins? Mr. Fulbright?
Here.
Mr. Moore? Here. Ms. Irwin? Here. Mr. Sims? Here. Mr. Hooper? Here. Mr. Howell? Here. Mr. Lindsey? Here. Mr. Dudley? We have more than a quorum.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Ms. Hopkins did say that she would try to be here, but she would probably be running late, if at all. Moving on, we have some things that can go under consent. We have the minutes. School trips, are there any school trips scheduled? I don't think there are, but that's on here anyway. Use of facilities, we do need to talk about. Let's go ahead and just say, are there any changes or updates to the minutes? Can we move that to the consent item for the board meeting? Okay, let's do that then. Do you want to tackle use of facilities now, or do you want to wait till later on down the road?
One thing, we do have an upcoming trip. We have a rugby team that qualified for a state championship tournament in Knoxville, and because it was a qualifier and not just a we want to go somewhere trip, we did push that on to you guys. It should be coming to you as an executive. I just wanted to make sure you guys did know that. Is
that all right to put that on consent then too? All right. Use of facilities. There is one question we need to address as a board. Whichever one of y'all want to take it, be fine.
We talked about this today in our office, and we basically, until you gave us direction, have contacted anyone that's using our facility right now. Mainly right now we have our churches. We do have just a couple of other small-time things that aren't really big, mostly outdoor. But we've told them until you directed us otherwise, we were good with them continuing. We do have protocols in place for cleaning, and we do have the terms that they have as far as using the building laid out pretty clear to them. We've not had a problem since we started letting folks back into the building with any issues, with anything they've done. We've not had any notice of a health scare or anything within their organization or because they were in our building. But that's obviously up to you guys on whether you want us to continue or not.
Is that something we need to have further discussion on? We just move that on to the regular board meeting? Okay, we'll just continue on the path that we're on, unless I hear any objections.
If I could.
All right, Mr. Moore.
Perhaps it may be worth, I know you may have had casual conversations with these entities, but maybe we should have something written up in there, at least right now, that kind of formalizes that hey, that they need to notify us if they feel like there's an event that takes place that is spreading, or maybe we need to reevaluate it, just to make sure they don't just say, oh, by the way, 2 weeks later. I think that might be appropriate, but other than that, I'm okay with them continuing.
And we can actually take care of that tomorrow. With the small number that we have, we can personally reach out and talk to all of them and give them guidance on if you do have some sort of case tracked or anything like that, this is how you notify us.
I think that's probably appropriate, so we're aware.
Okay.
All right, thank you. We'll move on then to new bit.
Chairman.
Oh, Mr. Lindsey.
I don't know if it's worth the conversation, but I don't necessarily have a problem with events that we have scheduled, but I don't know how good of an idea it is to take on any more, especially if we're not in school, if we're not using the building. I don't know how, if we should take on any more events, and that's just my personal feeling, but.
We have been asked mainly, and we kind of made an internal decision this week. We called a Facilitron and actually scaled back to you could only ask 3 months out. We had people wanting to schedule in April and May, and we just felt that there was too much unknown between here and now to go ahead and approve them to use the facility and to give them the fee for cleaning right now, because it may be more, it may be less in the future. So we've scaled it back. We don't really have anyone asking for the short term really from now to Christmas. Now, that's not to say we wouldn't, but it's all been spring type thing. But we can definitely, as long as school is out, we won't approve any new new folks to come in.
Okay. All right, then I think we've given you, enough direction, adequate direction? Okay. We'll move on to the budget amendments. Doug?
So there are many budget amendments on your agenda tonight. A lot of them have to deal with grant funds, food service, and revising a few line items and some grants. So if y'all have any questions specifically over any individual ones, I'd be happy to answer them.
Mr. Moore?
Hey, Doug, just a minor question. I noticed there was a couple in here that were reimbursements from insurance companies. I mean, they seem rather small, but is that just because of the nature of what those are that we've got to do a budget amendment on them?
Yes.
Okay. That kind of is what I thought, but I wasn't sure. Thank you.
Any other questions on the budget amendments? If not, we'll pass this on to the consent agenda. All right, we got it. The next two, internal school funds, accounting for athletic, and central high school finance. Financials? Okay, go ahead, Doug.
All right, so we've got the 141 fund, 142, and 143 fund financials. At this point in time, at the end of October, we are at just above a $5 million deficit. In the month of October, we were only at a $400,000 deficit, which is actually an improvement in comparison to where we're at. We expect this is normal for this part of the year. We expect to start picking up steam in November, December, January, and February. We'll have the majority of our property tax and BEP funds start to come in, and we'll start to improve our fund balance. Something that's very good is even though we were in a tough budgetary situation, we met our 3% test in the month of October, which is something that we did not do last year by quite a bit. So that's good news. If you want to review these financials further and you come up with any questions, just feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you. Are there any questions regarding the financials? Ms. Irvin?
Hey there, I pulled these up earlier today and was looking at them, and I'm not sure what number, but under the budget amendments, I noticed that there was a $69,300 technology, basically looks like to me it's maybe for our internet usage for our mobile students, and we're getting a credit for that. Is that our monthly bill, or is that like for a quarter, and is that something we're going to continue to get, that grant money continually?
We gave them our free and reduced data, and they determined the amount that we were eligible for. Right now, it's any purchase we make between now and December, I think it's December 30th. So, in looking at our calculations, we think we won't be eligible for approximately $29,000, but they are looking at extending some of those grants. I know they just came out today with some information about our LEA Programming and Supports grant. So hopefully maybe they'll come out with some other guidelines to extend some of the grant periods on there so that we can capitalize on using more of that money. So that money is based on, we used our CARES Act money to order hotspots and pay the monthly bill. So our intent is to transition some of that CARES Act, instead of spending that CARES Act money, transition it to equipment to buy more devices and use this connectivity grant since it has a short window. So if it extends longer, we will use that money longer until it runs out.
Okay, that was my question, if that was recurring. Thank you for answering, Mr. Gaines.
Any other questions on any of the financials or budget amendments? Seeing none, that'll go on to a consent agenda. Now, back to where I was headed the first time. The internal school funds, accounting for athletics, and central school finance, this was brought up for one specific question regarding a bill, and I'd like, Doug, if you could answer some of those questions. And I know we have a member, Ms. Powers has asked to talk at the end of our discussion, so if you could just give me an overview of what we're talking about and whatever you can tell me about it right now.
Well, so this is a bill from a vendor to an athletic fund at a high school, and it's been unpaid for quite some time. This is something that is kind of it's a result of how Murray County accounts for athletic funds. And, you know, we shouldn't have bills that go out for that long unpaid. The good news is that we're not being charged any interest. They are working with the vendor to make sure that it will be paid off. The vendor is working with Murray County, so that's good. I'm kind of approaching this from a third-party point of view. These funds are not under my office's jurisdiction, so this is just from the outside looking in and with the information that I have. But it's a systemic issue that has occurred in multiple schools across this district over the last 2 years that we have received findings for. So in my opinion, I think that the school board and the school district needs to take some action to prevent this from happening in the future. I would propose that the school board provide guidance on choosing an accounting alternative that is in the Tennessee Internal School Uniform Accounting Manual that all of the schools follow. Under page 4.3 and 4-4, in that manual, it says that the school board will provide and give guidance on which alternative schools should use. And so I would recommend that the school board identify which alternative should be accounted for, whether it's alternative 1, meaning you have one general athletics account, and then you can have subsidiary accounts, but if they go under and your general athletics account is still positive, then you would technically still be in compliance with the policy. Or alternative 2, every individual sport gets its own account, and if they go under, then you would be in violation of the policy, or that particular sport and account would. So I recommend that the school board make a decision on which alternative would be most beneficial for the school district and for the schools to follow, so that they have guidance. From the information I pulled, we do not have a policy on the school board manual website under TSBA that says this is the alternative a school should use. So the second thing is I think there's an opportunity here for people to be more forward about educating and mandating coaches and athletic directors to work together to submit an annual budget to the principal in order for them to be able to manage their funds appropriately. This is something that the school board doesn't really have to act on. This is already in the Uniform Accounting Policy Manual. It just needs to be reinforced and communicated so that people understand what's in there. For basically any items outside of the varsity bill, my advice on that is to let the comptroller's office do their job and determine whether any fraud has occurred or not. They have an entire division dedicated to fraud audits. They're excellent at their job. They do more fraud audits in this state than on government specifically than anybody else. And if there is fraud, they will find it and they will report it to us. The stakeholders that are involved in this situation, you know, this is a time for us to be patient, cooperate with their office's requests, don't interfere with any of their work, and let them have the information they need so they can do their job and let us know what happened. So that's really a full synopsis of what I gather from a third party and with the limited information I have at this time.
All right, I appreciate that, Doug, and that's, I know, just, we all have different areas where we excel, and I'm not an accountant. My wife, who is an accountant, reminds me of that all the time. So I appreciate your outside perspective on that. Now, one thing I want to clarify, you had said something about exercising patience with the comptroller and the way they were analyzing this. Did I also hear you say earlier that this is not accruing any interest or late fees?
From the information I have from the school, no.
Okay, thank you very much. I think, since this has kind of opened up a new door for our discussion.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Doug, did the schools, are the schools all following board policy? We just don't have one?
The policy they have to follow is the Tennessee Internal School Uniform Accounting Manual, which the school board has adopted under policy 2.9, but there's additional guidance that the board needs to provide. There are schools, every year there's a school that gets an audit finding, and those are the ones that basically didn't follow that bookkeeper's manual. And, we've had findings for similar issues in the past.
One thing I'd like to, like I said, this kind of opens up a new avenue. Would it be advisable for maybe the staff to flesh out those two options a little bit more and bring it back to the December work session so that we can have a little more in depth? Would that be a desire of the board to look at this a little more thoroughly? Mr. Laconi.
Well, one thing that would be helpful to have more time on, we are audited by a CPA firm. I have reached out to them about a few things on this. If the board has chosen an alternative in the past, it's just not listed in our policy manual, we may be able to reach out to them and find out if, how they audit us based on that. And they may know if in the past a previous board has chosen an alternative. But there's no evidence to suggest that the board has, but you have to audit on something to be able to give a finding to say that you're not doing something. So there might be some info there.
Then could we kind of have a two-prong approach to this? One would be to present us with the two options, and then in the meantime, if we find out we've already selected one, we can have that discussion a little bit different style. Okay, so we have the board. The board's giving you guys a little bit of direction so that we can get the information to give you other direction. So, appreciate your work in that. Ms. Powers, I'd like, this will be a good opportunity for our public comment period. And if you could state your name, district that you're in, and you'll have 5 minutes to address the board, and it will need to stay specifically on the bill in question.
First, thank you all very much for allowing me this opportunity. Mr. Fulbright, if I may, when I spoke with you, I did ask if this was going to be limited to 5 minutes, and you did say no, it would be open dialogue. So has this changed since you and I had that conversation?
I don't recall that conversation, but I can give you more time if we need it.
Okay, I would appreciate that. I think if I understand, let me be sure I understand, we are going to stick directly to the issue of an unpaid bill from Varsity.
Correct.
To Central High School. Okay, and also, there are other parents, here as well. I think.
You're the only one I've talked to about speaking on this matter.
Okay, well, if it pleases the board and they have something else to add, I would hope that since they devoted their time to come, that they might be recognized, but if not, I will respect that. Mr. Lukonen did say that it is good news that no interest is being accrued, and I do agree that is good news. However, on the bill it does say that there's 30-day net with 1.5% interest accrued monthly, so I think that was the kind of alarm bell that rang. So I pushed. I was getting pushback. I've met some resistance in speaking to the school board. Therefore, I went to a county commissioner, was placed on the financial management board, and then I was granted, this was granted permission on to this agenda, so I do appreciate that. I think I would really like to speak to the facts of that, and I hope that there can be discussion. I see some people from Central here, so I hope that we can all leave here today with a very clear understanding that a $44,000 bill arrived at Central September of 2019. There were some mistakes in the bill, and those were hammered out, and I believe as there's a timeline in your packet, one of the attachments that does indicate that by January of 2020, the bill was corrected. As a parent who was aware that I was going to owe some money, I had been asking numerous times, when am I going to be notified of the amount? But that did not arrive at my house until a letter that had been postmarked on July 20th contained the information. Now, that information was extrapolated into what was called a statement, but that was created by a employee of the schools. Please keep in mind that by July 20th, we were in a new fiscal year. Seniors had already graduated. One of the members of the team was a Czech Republic student who had gone back to the Czech Republic. I just don't think it was timely, and I think the other parents who are here will agree. We asked all of us, 3 of the 4 of us had children that had cheered the year before, so we were aware that we had settled our varsity balance in September and October. So it just, cheer ended February 10th. We were back from nationals and cheer was over. So from February 10th until schools shut down for COVID, that was 5 weeks. We were repeatedly asking for meetings that we were denied. And, then we received 2 separate communications because we kept asking. We are saying we want to pay our bill. And then in May, we received 2 different communications via a band app saying that the bill would be mailed. One communication, and I do have these with me if anyone would like to see, I have photocopies of them. One said that you would have your bill by May 15th. Again, that would still be in the fiscal year of the money being spent. However, the bill did not come. We were reaching out saying, hey, we have not gotten a bill. And then we received yet another band app message that said the bills were put in the mailbox. Again, that was in May, so again, we were in the current fiscal year. The bill did not get postmarked, or the statement, it was not the bill, until mine was July 20th. I think everyone would agree. July 20th, again. That's just a bit confusing. Additionally, I am the whistleblower. I did reach out to the comptroller because of an issue with some fundraising money that still to this day I have not been told where it was accounted for. But out of respect for what Mr. Lukonen said, we will stick to this bill. But I was the whistleblower to the comptroller. I've been in communication with them since probably after repeatedly we were denied meetings at Central. And as most of you are aware, we had a superintendent that was not very actively engaged in the job. Therefore, we felt like we needed answers when the amount was $3,500 went missing. Therefore, I am the whistleblower, and I called the comptroller. I've been in communication with them since then. And in September of 2020, the comptroller made the statement to me that he was very perplexed because he could not get basic information from Central. And I said, have you been able to get the varsity bill? And he said, no, I cannot. With that being said, someone just said lie. So I hope that we can have an open communication about why I'm being called a liar in this forum. But with that being said, it dawned on me that maybe the reason that giving the benefit of the doubt to the bookkeeper at Central, it dawned on me that maybe they don't have it. So I put forth a little effort by calling a cheer coach in a neighboring county and asking if they would share with me the timing of their bill and what the name on the top of their bill said. And I found out that it said Varsity Spirit Fashion. And so I Googled how do you contact Varsity Spirit Fashion, and I was able to get in touch with the customer service manager. And I said, hey, I am a parent in Murray County, Tennessee. It's Columbia Central High School. I have never paid a bill to you all. Do we owe y'all money? And I was informed that yes, there's over $40,000 that is delinquent since September 2019. Therefore, I said I would like a copy, and I was told as a parent I was not allowed to have access to that, but people in management in the county could request it. Therefore, I reached out to someone in the central office, and within 24 hours, they had that bill in their hand. And at that point, I did an open records request, and it was given to me. Please keep in mind that was the first open records request that had been granted to me. Complete open records request that had been granted to me. Any other information had been significantly redacted and amended. But So I had that in my hand, and then it was forwarded to the comptroller. So I hope that we can have an open discussion. Whoever, made the statement that I lied, I'd really like to hear their side of the story. But I can look at dates on a bill, and yes, I will agree that there were some mistakes in the varsity order, but I think that was cleared up by January of 2020, and cheer was over February 10th, and we were back from nationals that year was closed. So, again, Mr. Philbright, per our communication, you had mentioned that this was going to be cheer finances in its entirety, and I do completely respect that it's not. But if any, I was prepared tonight based on the agenda item and the communication from Mr. Fulbright to discuss it in its entirety. And I can back up any question that's asked to me. I can give you a clear, honest, and objectified answer. But out of respect for Mr. Laconin and the request of the comptroller, we can put that at bay. But I do think I would appreciate hearing everyone, staff, whoever, who has come to speak on this matter. But I think we can all agree that a bill that originally hit the schools in September of 2019 and today is unpaid is a problem because it is a new team. And how is that money going to get paid? Additionally, Central did, since it hit this agenda, pay $22,000, and as a stakeholder and a taxpayer in the community, I would appreciate to know, how that works. If I could be granted that, please.
All right, Mr. Laconin, I think we asked you and Mr. Hickman for next month to bring us back a policy review of how we do the finances throughout the athletic department. Is that correct?
I think that was a previous discussion after I gave my report. So
Yeah, I just wanted to make
you
sure I
guys
remember what I said.
wanted more information before you made a decision.
Right. And I think one thing I would also like to request is, per Ms. Powers' request, is that at that same time that you bring us those options, have us a solution to this of some sort, so that we can get a resolution and we can all move on beyond that. Thank you. Mr. Lindsay.
We got bombarded with attachments on this topic in our packet for this meeting, and I probably have spent way too much time looking at all of them. But I have some of the same questions that Ms. Powers had. Our topic tonight, we're talking about a bill from varsity, and that was not one of our attachments. I don't see that anywhere. So, and I'm not questioning Ms. Powers when I say this, but I would like, if there was or is a $44,000 bill from varsity, I'd like to see that. And then Ms. Powers asked the question, and then this is one of the attachments that was in our packet, is a account activity report that it appears to me it's headed cheerleaders, junior high boys, but I'm assuming that that's football cheerleading, and this account activity report shows a beginning balance on July 1 of $694, and then as you follow that down, the last transaction on that report was October the 27th, where it appears there was a check written to Varsity Spirit Fashions for $22,322, and if I can follow this, it appears to me that throws that account into almost a $20,000 deficit. So again, just following these attachments we have, I guess I have some of the same questions Ms. Powers has. How did we get, well, one, I would like to see the varsity bill. Two, if that's the case, that there was an outstanding and is an outstanding $44,000 bill, how did we get there? Three, if it appears that there's been $22,000 paid on that, but it got paid out of an account that only had $2,400 at the time. So where did that additional $20,000 come from? And then, if there's an outstanding balance, how do we pay that when we're already in the red, $20,000 in an account? I'm just trying to make all this make sense, and I just don't, any help would be appreciated.
Doug, do you have any guidance on that?
I mean, I'm sure somebody can provide the bill, you know. Like I said, these funds aren't my jurisdiction, so I don't handle it, day to day. A lot of those questions can be answered by the school bookkeeper and the coach.
So that would be something, I just asked y'all to come up with some sort of solution. Not necessarily you, Doug, I know this isn't you, but I think with your knowledge and guidance, Mr. Hickman and any of your, associated staff can come up with a resolution to this that will be acceptable. And then also some recommendations on where we proceed from here so that we don't get into this same situation in any other setting. Is that agreeable? Good.
Chairman Fulbright, may I speak?
Yes.
Mr. Lindsey, there's an attachment, it just says document, on Friday I sent two, there are two that are labeled document, they're not as clear as the others, but one is a varsity bill, and additionally, I walked around and put papers on everyone. If you will, there's a packet that's only 2 pages. It's a communication between Chris Pointer and varsity, and that does, actually, while it is not the bill, it is, the communication with varsity that indicates, and if I may clarify, the original bill up to September, may I clarify?
Yes.
Up through September of 2020, it was $44,000. At that time, Central paid $6,000, and I'm under the impression that was from a cheer account. But that left $38,000, and at the time of Mr. Pointer requesting that bill, the amount was $38,000.
Okay, thank you very much.
That bill is in that packet.
I think, our staff has their marching orders. I would ask the board between now and just the next week or two, go through all these attachments, and if any other questions come up, shoot them to Doug or Mr. Hickman as they look towards addressing this issue. Ms. Parker?
Does that mean this is gonna continue to be on the board agenda for December?
We will be discussing what Doug said. We haven't really decided on a clear-cut option for how to handle the finances within the athletic department. Am I understanding you correct, Doug? That part of it will be. And then
That
they will
part
bring
will
us
be
a
discussed in
resolution
December.
to this at the next work session.
One thing I'm concerned about is, I've heard Doug say that this really isn't his domain. And I feel like we're putting a lot on him to give us advice when this is a school issue, this is a central office issue, and Doug's got plenty of stuff to do. So I don't know, I mean, I appreciate the knowledge that he can provide, but I also feel like he's getting out of his lane in a way, and I'm a little concerned about that. When I go through and look at this manual, there's responsibilities that we have as a board. This is the first time I've seen this in 6 years, I'll just be honest with you. So I don't know what we haven't done. I also don't know what previous boards did, so I'm a little confused about that. But I do know that I assume directors of schools and principals have a copy of this and know what they're supposed to do. So do we have any indication? I know there was some stuff about Nissan and whatnot. Were those fundraising requests, were they approved by the director of schools?
We assumed they were.
I don't want an assumption.
Right.
This is something that you guys have known was gonna be on the agenda for a month. I don't want assumptions right now. I'm just gonna be very honest. This whole situation, and I could get very passionate about this, because I don't think it should be before us. I've never thought it should be before us. But it had a chance to be handled at the school level, it had a chance to be handled at the administrative level, at the central office level, and now it's here because you guys didn't do it. And I, on Friday, got to look at our agenda with a bunch of accounts, and I'm like, what are we supposed to do with all these CHS accounts? There was no direction from anybody as to what we were supposed to do with those. I don't really care what all these accounts say. I don't even know that that's really our domain. That's all handled at the school level, am I correct?
Correct.
I mean, we can't approve a budget amendment tonight that would clear all this up, could we?
I believe not.
No, I don't believe that's what anybody's asking for. I believe what we're
I'm not
looking
saying that's
for
what people are
is-
asking for, but what I'm saying is, why is something that can only be handled at the school level before the board because it wasn't addressed at the school or central office level? That's my concern. And then you're gonna put in an administrative manual in there that I haven't seen in 6 years, but y'all have seen, and then you're gonna tell me you assume things got done? I know you weren't here for that, but we don't know what our procedures are at this point, and that's a real concern going forward on a lot of other things. I think it was mentioned too that there are other schools that have these issues. So does that mean going forward, one of the duties it looks like is for the director of school to provide us with any information to the board if there's a financial deficiencies?
No, I believe the direction that we're headed is I have asked Doug and Mr. Hickman to come up with an answer on how to prevent this from coming to the board again going forward by looking at the policies we have, clarifying them so that the schools know what is expected, and that we can proceed without having to have this kind of a discussion here at a board work session.
With all due respect, Mr. Fulbright, there have been months for that type of conversation to have occurred. We've got 4 parents that came here tonight for some resolution on this. I'm not saying that we have to reach a resolution, but I don't want to just turn it over to Doug and say, hey, bring us something back in December. I don't think that's fair either. I think we need to look at what our responsibilities are. We need to look at what central office's responsibilities are. We need to look at what the school's responsibilities are. And I'm not really wanting to just kick that back because, quite frankly, y'all had months to do this, and it didn't get done. That's where I am on this. It does say in here for the director of schools, and I'm just looking at your manual that you put on there. So I assume that y'all are prepared to talk about anything that's in there. But it says one of the responsibilities is for, number 10 on page 3-2, it says the director of school will ensure the financial reports of individual schools are submitted in accordance with the manual and any other Board of Education requirements, and informing the local board of any deficiencies, audit findings, or other significant information noted upon review of the financial reports. What I thought I heard from Doug was that this is not just a CHS cheer issue. This is going on at other schools. So are we going to get notification of that?
So the comptroller's office receives the audit from the CPA firm and publishes it on their website. It is available for anybody to watch or view or read. But also that the most recent audit ends, 18-19 fiscal year is the most recent audit you can see. So June 2019 is the most recent date you can view the audit and the findings.
Well, but it also says financial report, so I assume that each of the schools are capable of submitting reports to you that would show if there are balances in their school that are not in the black. And that's what I thought I understood you to say, that we have other schools that have accounts. I don't want to pick on Central about this. If we have other schools, we need to address this holistically, which I thought was the purpose of this as well. I don't want to pick on anybody, but I do want us to make sure that we are addressing this not just at one school, but at all of our schools.
And I can't say I disagree with you, Ms. Parker, and that is part of the systemic problem, and we've been talking about this for a while now, even before Central, because that was brought to my attention, and when we went to look for policy, there was no defined policy. And so we have been trying to maneuver and work, and this is a good place for it to come up, is saying, hey, now we need to do something with it. I'm not privy right now to any of the audits from last year. I'll see them when you see them, because I was not here. I do agree that we do need to define what policy, and not just policy, but procedure as well, how we move forward when we do have these things. One of the problems that we are seeing, and I'm not trying to use this as a crutch, so please don't think of it as a crutch, we have no financial person in central office. We have to lean on Doug. We have to lean on David Huss for any questions that we have. And part of the solutions, looking forward on part of the solutions for Central on this specific account, we have leaned on Doug and Mr. Huss on how to do corrective action, and that's how we've been moving forward. We will, obviously, when we come to you with the resolution, we'll include that as part of what we have done. I agree. You know, I've principles where we were budgeting. We looked at those accounts and we weren't upside down. But I do believe that it does need to start somewhere, and I'm not trying to toss the ball back to you, but we need to work together to produce this policy and the procedures of the guiding way we do this.
I don't disagree with that, and I'm fine to look at the policies. I think we need some direction when we know that there's deficiencies from y'all's side. Y'all have to bring it to us, because we're not there on the day-to-day basis to know, oops, there's a gap, we need to fill this gap. But you keep saying the audits from last year, and I think that document that was on there talked about financial reports. So I would suggest that y'all also look at procedures to make sure that you're continually looking at school accounts to make sure that they are not in the red. I would also say, I think there was a statement made that there was, and Ms. Power said it, that the comptroller struggled to get a copy of the varsity bill. I don't know if that was true or not, but Doug is not over any of the people that would have that information, I don't believe. So, again, I think we have to make sure that we're letting Doug stay in his lane, but your staff needs to be handling the management side of that. If there is a lack of cooperation with the comptroller, I have dealt with the comptroller before myself on this board. They can be your best friends, they can be very helpful with you, but if you're putting up roadblocks, I shudder to see what that report's going to say. But I would also say, procedurally, we have a varsity bill that objectively did not get paid for a month. So I would love to see, when you come back next month, also a procedure for when bills are supposed to be paid and how we're monitoring that, because I don't think any of us want any school or any organization that's affiliated with Maury County Public Schools to run up a bill that they can't pay.
And I agree wholeheartedly. And let me go back and make a comment about the comptroller. The comptroller has only called me once when he introduced himself and said, I'm going to be this person. Other than that, he has not spoken to me. I believe he has spoken to Jake and he has spoken to Doug. But for whatever reason, and pretty much the only thing that he told me, well, we've spoken twice because I had to granted permission to look at anything to do with the cheerleading. He had to get notification from his boss just to even have me to look at one side of the problem, and he was basically stated that I was to stay out of the financial side, or else he would see that as interfering with an investigation. Those were the two times, so he may have spoken to either Jake or Doug about anything else, but to me, that's all I've heard from him.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, when I said that we need to bring some resolution, I didn't mean just specifically to one instance and one bill. I mean to a systemic problem, and I think that's what you guys have addressed. Doug, I want to clarify one other thing too, Mr. Laconin rather. When we consolidated under the modified 81 Financial Management Act, did we not bring the school finances into your department?
Are you talking about the internal
Oversight.
school funds?
No, not the individual school funds.
Okay.
Oversight of the school's finances.
Yes. It
Okay.
has a
So we're
general
not
statement.
really imposing too much on you to make sure that we're doing it correct, and you can give us guidance. We're not asking you to crunch the numbers.
If anybody's ever asked me a question, I'm happy to help.
I
So,
have known you now for 6 years, and that's definitely been the case. You've been more than happy to help, to keep us on the right path. Because in all honesty, the less audit findings we have, the better off you look, quite honestly. Not that you don't look good anyway, Doug. All right, Mr. Howe.
So, I'm curious how we got to this point. How does a group in a school amass debt with money that they don't have? Like, why are we not issuing purchase orders? And if they don't have $44,000, why are we letting them amass that debt? I don't understand why. I don't know about Central. I've not dealt with Central, but I have dealt with Culleoka, and I know that Culleoka, if you want to buy a bag of seed for $50, Melody's not going to issue a purchase order unless you have $50 in your account. So I think maybe I think we're operating on different sets of rules, and I think that maybe we need to somehow unify that. I don't know how if that's just a policy procedure. If
That's
we
what
need
we've
a
asked
head
them to do for
bookkeeper,
next month.
right? If we need a head bookkeeper, I don't know. But under no circumstances should we have a bill for $44,000 outstanding for over a year at this point, for a group that doesn't have $44,000. Now, I understand that they plan to have a fundraiser in the spring, how they had always done, and that has covered that bill. But that's not, I don't pay my bills with my credit card expecting at the end of the year to pay it all off with one big lump sum. I kind of want to pay as I go. So that definitely is something we need to look at as far as going forward. But I do have that question about if there's $20,000 that was paid, I'd like to know where that came from. I'm assuming it came from another account. So we're taking money from other kids who have raised money and paying off this debt because they didn't get to have a fundraiser this spring. I kind of have a fundamental problem with that. That's taking money away from kids that raised money for their program. So that's all I have.
And I just say again that, I can't disagree with you that right now the policy there has not been an outlined policy and procedure, and that's why we go back to what Chair Fulbright is saying was we need to develop it and make sure that we stick to it, and we can have action by saying this policy wasn't followed or this procedure wasn't followed. But at this time, without one, it's been, I don't want to say common practice, but what's been done is, knowing from your statements from previous years, we know we cover that money, so therefore we'll get it made up by the end of the year. But this year, the big C word caught a lot of folks with their pants down. But it does go back to what you said, is spending the money without having it.
Thank you. Mr. Moore.
No, thank you. I'm gonna try to stay focused on this. I guess functionally, I don't understand, if we've identified that there's different accounting systems taking place, I don't know what on earth the board has to do to resolve that. And I'm just thinking through this, trying to be logical. I don't know why at some point central office didn't just say, okay, let's just pick one. Once you identify it immediately. Because frankly, I think whichever one you bring us, we're gonna go, okay, because I don't care functionally which one. If you tell me it's the right one and you've researched it and it sounds approachable. So to me, that's what the problem I have with bringing this back and re-talking about it. And this gets into the broader issue that I've had all along, is something that should have been very simple to resolve, has been dragged out for months, if not a year now at this point. And I just don't understand. And I believe I sent an email about a month and a half ago saying this exact same thing. Just resolve this. And we're still here talking about it. And I frankly don't understand why. Because it should have been resolved at multiple levels. And what it looks like, and I'll just tell you, to be honest, what it looks like is it has been stalled, hoping that somebody would just give up and quit trying to figure out what's going on. And that infuriates me, to be honest. Because that's how it looks. And I just don't understand why we can't just be the responsible party that we are as a school district and just resolve this. If something needs to be done, it should have already, again, I'm thinking it should have been brought to us, hey, we've already implemented a unified thing, we've already talked to all the schools in the district, and they're moving towards one plan, and here's what it is. That should have already been done before it got here tonight. I don't understand why it hasn't. Again, we could talk about it next month, but that's what's gonna happen. You're gonna bring us a recommendation, we're gonna say yes, and you're gonna start doing that. We
Mr.
could have
Licona,
saved 3 months.
Did you not say that it has to be approved by the board?
The board does have to make a decision
That's
on
what I thought.
which alternative is chosen in the manual that has been adopted for the schools to follow.
And the board has to make that decision?
It says that in the manual, yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Lindsey?
Well, that was exactly what I wanted to talk about. This bookkeeping manual that Mr. Luconen put, and I printed it out and read all 33 pages. It's real interesting if you guys wanna read it, but he put it on there for tonight, and it has become apparent, for whatever reason, that we as a board, and who knows, maybe not ever, has the board taken care of their responsibility when it comes to this bookkeeper's handbook. And like Mr. Luconen said, on page 4-3 and page 4-4, it says our responsibility as a board is to pick either alternative 1 or alternative 2 when it comes to dealing with these school funds. And I think it's incumbent upon us to go ahead and have that conversation. I'm sure that staff has looked at it. I know Doug has looked at it. We probably have an opinion on it, and rather than waiting the next month to talk about it again, I think we could vote on it in 2 weeks when we can vote, but I think we need to discuss it tonight, personally, and go ahead and take care of our responsibility as a board in this.
Mr. Hooper?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. That's where I was going with it. And if you're looking for it on the computer, it's bottom of 14, top of 15. The way it sounds like alternative tool seems like the best option for us right now, because it's exactly the problem we're having is with alternative 1. You have subsidiaries that are gonna incur this debt, but the whole count is not, so it makes it pretty easy. Of an overview, we can look at it, it's like, well, they're fine, but you don't get to see these individual accounts incurring so much debt. So, I mean, if we're gonna talk about it, I would prefer alternative 2. So, I mean, if we can open that for discussion in whatever way.
All right. Ms. Kinzer?
I'm with them. I would rather us choose one, make a decision, vote on it at the meeting, and to prolong this. This is just, I mean, to rehash this over and over, I mean, these are athletic funds. I'm sure other teams purchase uniforms before they have revenue, sports, and all that. So that's part in board policy. No board policy has been violated, but yet we need to make sure that this doesn't happen in this way again, then I think we can take care of it. And I mean, Austin said his daddy's an accountant, but I'm just saying, I think I would rather have that discussion as to which one, make the decision, move on it, and put this to rest.
Okay, then it's hard to hear that we're gonna vote on this in 2 weeks. Mr. Lindsey?
Doug, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I can summarize these 2 alternatives in Wayne terms.
I think you got it. Go ahead.
Well, alternative 1 basically says that there's one general athletic fund, and every sport works under that, but as long as that one general fund has money in it, everything's kosher. Alternative 2 says that each one of those each sport has its own fund, and if you don't have money in that fund, you can't spend it. And that fund can never go in the red.
In Wayne talk, that's a check mark.
Now,
Yeah, that's right.
And in Wayne talk, I don't see how we can go any other way than alternative 2. That each sport, each entity that's responsible for raising money, that they can spend the money they raise, and if they don't have the money, they can't spend it.
Mr. Hickman?
I see, you know, when you look at option 2, it does seem pretty cut and dry. But one of the reasons that they gave option 1 is your Title IX sports. We have sports out there that could not raise enough money for their part of the TSSAA dues, nor could they raise money for uniforms. And that is why that option 1, in my opinion, is put in there, is to help when we're looking at some of these minor sports, to give kids the opportunity to participate in some sport to be able to be financed sufficiently, because with option two, you would leave some sports where they would have no option but to shut down.
Does that, harken back to how a major college can have a field hockey team, but still rely on the football program bringing in $100 million every year?
Correct.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsey?
But Mr. Lucana, under alternative two, I don't see anywhere where there cannot be some policy in there that says that, that revenue generating sports, football, basketball, that we can still have a athletic fund, a general athletic fund, or we could take a certain percentage of their gates and give it to the non-revenue sports. Do you see anywhere where that's prohibited?
I did ask David Huss about sports sharing revenue, and he seemed to think basically if one sport's in trouble and you're under alternative two and that other sport bails that sport out, then he did refer and say that would more than likely be a finding. But what I can do is further research and just ask if we can basically have a hybrid of the two and follow alternative two and still have accounts be able to help other accounts out if willing, or I can just ask, you know.
Sounds like you're gonna modify Plan 2 to make it Plan 1, but still call it Plan 2. Ms. Parker?
Can you require a budget as a part of this? Is that a policy that we could look at for each athletic sports team, that they have to, you know, submit a budget that is approved by principals, athletic directors? I know we pay athletic directors at each of the schools. Can we do that?
What I believe what we could do is, instead of saying, hey, we're gonna do alternative two and risk with the audit finding, is go with the policy of alternative one and then write procedure under it, how they need to perform in these accounts, which one can be, it can't go negative. And that can be a procedure that we add to the policy. Doug and I have talked about some of these policies and some of the recommendations that we'd like to ask for that we can put under policy one. The policy one just states for the state that this is the one we follow. Then we follow it up with procedures right under it. You know, what we're finding, and I think I've alluded to some of you, is what we need to be doing is every time that we now are looking at cleaning up policies, we need to make sure that we're cleaning up the procedures that follow with them. And then when we introduce the board with a policy, if there's procedures that go with it, it needs to be together in saying, these are the policies, these are the procedures that go with the policy. In my opinion, if we do, if the board does so want to do the first one, I would make sure it's heavily laden with procedures that not only us, but make sure that David Huss looks over and say that'll be okay, that won't be an audit finding if we go that route.
Well, if we're looking at voting on this in 2 weeks, can you, I mean, we can, to me, what I would envision on this agenda, we would have option one as a policy that we can approve, option two as a policy that we can approve. Whoever wants to make the motion up here can say, I move to approve one or two. And then you can, you know, then you can bring to us the next month what all the procedures are that go along with it. 'Cause there is like a 30-day, you know, we have to post it 2 times. So I think it would still give you time to do the procedures. But I hear that there's a lot of talk going on. I just want to see, like, we gotta get to the action step of all this stuff. We can't just talk about we've identified the problem. We've got to see the resolution of it, and we can bat things around for, like, I'm sure you guys can, for hours. We don't really want to do that. We want this to work for y'all. We want it to work for the schools. I think we want it to work for the coaches and the parents as well. So whatever we need to do to make that happen, but I don't really want to bat it around for too long. I just want you guys to give us what the 2 options are, let us approve the policy, and then y'all go to work, is how I envision it.
Okay.
I agree, but I also think that we need to make sure that we go backwards and fix what's already been done too, and I think
that's
gonna
what
have
we've
to be-
charged you with to take care of as a central office. The board doesn't need to have any say-so in this. it should be handled at the central office level. All right. Mr. Howell, did you have something?
And just to be clear, I don't want just an accounting procedure. I would like to have a purchasing procedure, because an accounting procedure is great, but they can still incur debt. So if there's not a PO associated with that, it doesn't get paid. So there's got to be a procedure that everything goes through, because, I mean, I can call it varsity right now and order a bunch of stuff and have no money in my account. So there's got to be a procedure to go in line with that, because...
Mr. Lukonen?
So, the policy manual, the bookkeeping accounting manual, says that you follow the purchasing, policy of the district. So that it would technically default to the purchasing manual that I passed, back in over a year ago, that for whatever reason has never been put on the TSBA website for people to, the purchasing one isn't. I know for a fact it isn't, because when you look at it, it's still the old document that was approved in 2017. And under individual schools, the only guidance that is given as far as purchasing says the superintendent of schools must approve the following purchases: single piece of equipment greater than $5,000, anything that's attached to a building, and one that will remain a permanent fixture. Other than that, you can buy whatever you want. So, you know, that's the guidance that is under policy 2.805 for purchasing. The policy that the Financial Management Board passed in October of 2019, and you guys approved to put on the manual, I then asked Dr. Marzak for the next 7 months to have it put on here so that employees can follow it, so that we don't end up getting audit findings. Because if they go to the place where they're supposed to view, I'm getting hyped up, but if they go to the place to where they're supposed to follow these guidelines, and they read it and they say, well, I'm doing that, I'm good, when that's not the most recent policy. And then finally, you know, we get a response from the TSBA. I'm gonna throw them under the bus too, if we get a chance. So in June, they said that they're gonna go ahead and they'll put it on there for us. They'll update it for us. And we pay for TSBA to review these policies, so I had her review them all, and she said she'd put them on there. Well, here we are. It's November 17th, 2020. This occurred, she said she put them on there June 11th, 2020, and that would be the updated purchasing policy that they can follow. But no, school employees have to go to the Murray County Financial Management Board's website to follow purchasing policy. But the policy that is in place now, you know, if it was over $10,000 and they're gonna cut a check, they gotta come to the school board. So, and there's also bid procedures, there's, you know, purchase orders. At the individual schools, technically, you know, your principal is the purchasing agent over those specific funds, and so a request has to be turned in for that, so.
All right, thank you. Seeing no, Ms. Powers, I'll let you wrap it up.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Mr. Lindsey,
No, I wanna comment on what Doug just said.
Okay.
First, I really want to thank all of you for allowing me this opportunity to come here and speak. I don't think any of you all can appreciate the road that the 5 stakeholders that are here have had to walk to get this matter heard. Y'all have no idea. It's been long and it's been hard, and appreciating everyone's comments. Mr. Moore mentioned that, you know, there were many levels that this could have been taken care of, and that is the gospel truth. Mr. Moore was very insightful when he said that he thinks that it was hoping to be stalled until it was given up. That is true. Again, there are 5 of us here tonight. If anyone could tell just a glimpse of their story, y'all would be shocked. Mr. Howell mentioned that there's a fundraiser every spring. As a parent who cheered the year before this, there was not a fundraiser in the spring, so I can only speak to my experience, but I'm not sure that I would agree with that. You also mentioned that money, it appears, is probably being taken from other programs. I think you're very wise to have that insight. I would like to to make mention that sometimes, having been a member of the school board, I'm not sure if some of you may not know, but I did serve on the school board, for 4 years. Starting 6 years ago, I've been off for 2 years, but, you know, it's interesting sometimes where things can be used to your benefit or not, but I sent in March, when I was receiving pushback from the first 2 levels where this could have been handled, being both the coach and then the principal, I, went to the policy manual and I went through, spent a tremendous amount of time asking questions specifically policy related, because I did learn, it all by TSBA, continuing ed, that policy is power, and I sent over 20 questions related to policy that I felt like had been deviated from. And do you know what the answer was to most of those? We followed the Tennessee Internal School Uniform Accounting Policy Manual. That's the answer I got to numerous questions. I didn't get answers to my questions, I got that. And it wasn't true. So just please keep in mind that this is not a new term to many people in this room. And I will be happy, if anyone is interested, I will send you both my questions, and my questions are in one color and they sent answers in another. I do believe that was also approved by Mr. Wolliver and Mr. Lukonen. That crossed his desk as well, but he was given some, I think, maybe premature assurance that everything was fine. I do hope that as a board, you all will spend a little more time talking about Mr. Lukonen's responsibility with the way the finances are structured in Murray County under the 81 Act. Mr. Lukonen, I think, is very knowledgeable, informed, and actually very good at his job. However, I think you need to recognize that he has no authority within the school system.
Bring it back to just the invoice if we could.
Yes, indeed. Mr. Lukonen has no authority over anyone who can pay the invoice nor be held accountable for the outstanding invoice. I hope that's to the point of the bill.
We've already addressed that with Mr. Hickman.
I heard Mr. Hickman say that there is no policy, so as a stakeholder and a taxpayer in this county, I'm gonna ask for some education, please. I did give y'all several papers, and I did include, Board Policy 2.800, and it does reference the Tennessee Internal School Uniform Accounting Policy Manual. And I am very thankful that maybe some questions have come out of this unfortunate situation, that going forward our county's going to be better. But could y'all please read that and explain to me how Mr. Hickman can say that we have no policy? You know, I understand there's part of it that references that, but if you look at lines 19 through 22, I think it speaks quite directly to that we do have a policy that you can't pay for things, you cannot purchase things that you cannot pay for. And we have not been able to pay for them over a year. And if you were given a roster, I think you would be very interested to see the number of names that were on the roster in the year that this bill that was accrued compared to now. I'm going to say it may be 3. So who is going to make the money that's going to pay that bill? And so, I'm shocked to hear Director Hickman say that there is no policy. I would like for someone to explain to me what this is, 2.800. Sorry, I'm going back through my notes. I very much appreciate everyone who is engaged in this conversation. I think you all have very good insights and actually care about this matter and moving forward by adopting some new practices. I think our county will be much better, but I do hope that you will all appreciate that we started, the 5 stakeholders that are here who are not being granted the opportunity to speak, started asking questions about this bill in probably September of 2019, because having been previous parents, we paid the varsity bill in September the year before. We have been begging and pleading. We have been denied meetings. We have been disrespected tremendously, and as Mr. Moore mentioned, there were many levels that this could have been handled. However, I very much appreciate the opportunity that we can speak to this tonight.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lindsay, you're gonna have the last word on this.
You guys might have just worked it out, but can we make sure with TSBA tomorrow that this happens, and please update us that it has happened. It's just really frustrating that, that this is a policy that got passed before I even got on this board, but our policy manual is not updated, and then it's doubly frustrating that we pay somebody to do that as a service, and it hadn't been done. So if I hadn't said it, it's really frustrating, but.
Yes, and if one of y'all could follow up with us, later on in the week. All right, thank you very much for the discussion. Moving on, item number 2 under new business, meeting video streaming service. Who wants to take that one? Is that Moore? Tommy? Mr. Tommy.
As you guys know, I brought you guys some information that had to do with basically changing how the format of the board meetings would go, the agenda options, Shirley even running the meeting. I know Mr. Moore and I had discussion, so this will be a major undertaking. It's, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Moore, you have to back me up with the documents, but I think it's like $22,000, and what this will basically do is this would change the format that we have. And Ms. Shirley, we have not paid this year. It's $2,500 for this year for the TSBA system, and we have not paid that yet, correct? But it's coming due very soon. Okay, so what we were looking at, we were asked to come up with some options that are streaming. It goes along the lines of what they use at the county, the actual same system, everything, archiving, all that, to give us a more of a professional a way of streaming meetings and letting the public see content. Mr. Moore?
I think that sums up. I think the original question was, can we just start getting some streaming? And in discussions with Mr. Schuyler, I think it became clear it was a very, very broad topic that actually kind of wormed its way into a lot of different areas, including, tasks of staff that are here for the meetings, how we allot for that, what our budget is as a board for what we're going to budget for staff to run this, for the equipment, the software, the fact that we would be changing how our TSBA hosts, I guess the VOA Meeting Connect, they host all of our agendas, which is a nice feature, but that would all be changing. How we vote would be changing. It would be moving to the discussion part of this, I would think it would be appropriate that if we as a board decide we want to do something different, to kind of table this until budget time, and that I think the board would need to set a budget for what we want to spend for these things, and then work backwards from there. I mean, that would be where I would go. I felt like as soon as this started happening, it was just snowballing, and then we're mid-year, we'd have to come up with money to do this, and I don't think that's appropriate right now. But I do think come budget season, we should talk about as a board what we should budget for, what we want to have happen for it, what we're willing to pay for it, and then what can we get for that. I think that's where I would be.
What budget item would this come into? School board budget? Okay, so let's do that, then let's plan on tackling it when we get to, or planning for it, not tackling, but planning for it when we get to budget.
I will say the one thing, we have not paid the invoice. We probably do need to go ahead and pay for the service we've already got. So however that needs to be done, we should probably tackle that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Lindsay?
So, just catching me up, so we pay $2,500 a year for the TSBA service, is that what I heard? Just for the agenda? And then, like this attachment, there's a bunch of options. So it would be $22,000 a year with the options you suggest. Is that what I gathered?
The only option that we did not pick was there was the option to actually, if people moved meetings, but if I'm not mistaken, I think that's correct. It would be 22. And I'm sorry, I actually was looking at it back there, and I without having it right with me, I think that was just for the voting part, it wasn't 22,000. If you do apples to apples, it wasn't. It was similar cost, but when you add everything that we're going to go with streaming, and I can break that down if you want. For what we currently pay with the 2,500, I think it was more like $5 for them. But then when you start adding this stuff to it, the archiving, the online, all that content, that's where it started getting. That's where the rest of the money comes from.
Right. Well, I don't have a problem with it. I'm not very fond of. Personally, when I try to look at this agenda and these attachments, it kills me. I hate it. So if we could get it, if there's something we can do to make that easier, I'm for it. And then just throw it in. If you ever go and watch the county commissions, it is very user-friendly. It's very nice to use. It's nice to watch live, but it's also nice if you have to go back and look at something. It's very easy. So I just think it could be a beneficial tool to us. But.
And just briefly, just to add, at one time, the technology department, before we switched, we actually ran the meeting, and then it kind of went away from that. And again, so if it went back, it's not something we couldn't do. It would just go back in the job description, and we'd have a plan and a process and a backup in case something happened.
And if I could say, Mr. Lindsey, I actually agree. I think I would like to move this direction. I just think moving this direction mid-year without a budget item is probably a bad choice. So, I would like for us, as that budget time's come, to figure out how to make this work, because I do agree. I think it functions nicely, and I think it gives the functionality that, frankly, the public has asked for, and I think it would be a good tool to have.
All right, so we will take this up again come budget time. Instruction, Mr. Gaines, let's talk software.
The LeadSoft software is it's a purchase that's less than $10,000, but we understood that any agreement had to be signed by you and the county purchasing agent, so it's just for your approval there. It is less than $10,000, but however, because of the agreement, we wanted you to see it so that you could approve it.
Ms. Irvin.
I'm not familiar with that program. I mean, I have no problem personally doing anything to help the teachers, but can you give me some insight what that program offers for our educators and students?
It's actually something that Jack's going to use for our communication and being able to reach out to employees and others. Mr. Hickman's used it before.
While we're waiting on him, this was when you guys asked me, was there a portal or a way at the beginning of the COVID crisis that we could get direct questioning and responses to parents? This was the system that I told you guys that I would like to pursue, and it's very valuable, and I'll hand it over to Mr. Cobb and let him explain.
Hi, Jack Cobb, Communications. Let's Talk Software is an integrated part of will be an integrated part of our website, and it will allow us to filter communications directly to individuals. It'll take emails off the website, which will be beneficial because you get less spam. And it holds the people receiving the emails accountable with the software. So there's no lag in, no ability to lag, because there will be a red flag go up if somebody gets an email, in instruction or academics or wherever, and they need to get a reply to it. It's also helps on the social media forefront. It integrates with our social media platforms. It's very powerful software. I could bring back a demo if you'd like to see it.
I trust your expertise. I just always like to know what I'm approving. Probably off topic, but for those of us who watched the TSBA webinar today, with technology being so ever-present, one of the things that they mentioned is that a lot of our younger teachers are facing burnout from feeling like they constantly have to respond because we're in this constant feedback world, and they had referenced that if we're going to look at adopting a policy like this, that maybe we potentially later look at some kind of policy to guide our teachers that, like, if it's urgent, it'll be responded to urgently, but if it's not, maybe look at that within the week. I think that's vital because I know they have a lot of irons in the fire, so something else to think about if we're going to be pushing more to those staff members.
This type of software also works off algorithms that can be programmed into the reading the emails and the messages that come in and help categorize them and prioritize them. It's actually very, very smart. I like it.
Mr. Lindsey.
It says $9,375 for the remainder of this school year.
Yeah.
So once we go talking about budget time, if we budget for an entire year, will that number change?
Yeah, it runs about $3.50 per student.
But so there's no difference in we're buying it for half a year and then next year we would be buying it for a full year.
Right, but the half a year is a discounted price up front to, try out the software, see if we like it, and then you decide to renew when it comes to budget time this coming summer.
And that's my question, so the renewal's gonna be, you're telling me $18,000, $19,000?
Yeah, I don't have a number on the pricing.
I didn't-
Yeah, I believe it's in there.
Are we bound past the
No.
end of the school year?
I don't believe so. No.
Any other, Mr. Moore?
Side item to that, actually, if Mr. Chairman and Mr. Hickman, if we could make sure at some point in the next month, we probably do need to discuss, employee balancing work-home life, and some expectations. It's a whole other subject and I'll bring that up in an email. I just didn't want to forget it while we're talking about it there briefly, because I think that is a good point, that we make sure that there's not an expectation that, even though it's an urgent email, I consider urgent to be classroom time, not
Business
10
time,
PM on
right.
a Wednesday night. So, I think that's fair. And if I understand this correctly, this would be facilitating student-teacher communications, administrative communications, or in what realm are we talking about for this
It would be
software?
mostly administration, communications, and we can
So this
set
would be
it up to
outside
do-
of the various other platforms we have for students to
Right.
reach out to
Right.
teachers.
Go ahead.
One of the services that this does is sometimes parents, they just don't know who to ask the question to. In this way, it gives them the opportunity, and it goes through, if they don't know which button to push, it can go straight to the administrator and he can forward it on. The time clock part, it just helps to know, like principals will be aware if they get somebody in their building that there's an email. And the clock isn't like you got 5 minutes. For example, if, and this could be a possibility, someone sends an email and it's really directed toward the board. We can push it to the board and you go on a clock and say after 10 days it's not been, anything has been done to it, the administrator gets alerted, hey, you still have this one out there to be answered. So, I might email Mr. Fulbright and say, Chair Fulbright, hey, just don't forget about that, let's talk, you have. And, it's a pretty neat little option. It is pricey, but like, Mr. Cobb has said, its functionality will save time, it will help parents that just, and you guys run into that, where who do I ask this to? Where do I go? Where do I ask this question? And that way we can forward it right, it forwards right to where it belongs. If it needs to go to a teacher, we're not saying take away the teacher's emails. Parents still have that where they can do this. It's just really a good communication tool. They can go on the school's website or the district website, I have a question, and we can make sure it processes in the right place.
Thank you. Do we want to move this to consent, or do we want to have more discussion and take a vote at the meeting? Discussion? Okay, we'll discuss this and take a vote at the meeting.
Thank you.
Number 3, MOU between Mount Pleasant Middle School of Visual and Performing Arts and Kennedy Broadcasting. Mr. Gaines.
Again, it's just another memorandum of understanding between, Mount Pleasant Middle School and Kennedy Broadcasting to host a radio show in Mount Pleasant at their, at their studio. The radio station will be responsible for securing sponsors, and it will not incur any cost to, the middle school or to us.
Okay. Any discussion on this, or can we put it on consent?
I have a question.
Oh, Ms. Irvin.
I just wanted to, think about, and I'm probably overthinking this, I'll state that first, but, with the radio station coming into the school, I'm guessing, is that something that they're gonna be having a lot of different visitors coming in? We gotta think about our security. I'm sure all that's already been well thought out ahead of me, but that's one concern. Second concern, I didn't know if it was gonna be interactive with the students at that school, if it's something he's wanting to be cooperative, or if it's something he's intending to be his own platform and just use our resources. And third, just wondered if it was going to be pushed to our kids, or if it's just solely to go out into the radio mainstream. That was some of the concerns I had.
From what I understand, that the students will help to operate the broadcast so they can get the experience. It will be a routine broadcast. Mr. Cobb could probably talk more. I think they're doing the Big Yellow School Bus. Is that correct, Jack? So they'll just be helping the broadcast of the Big Yellow School Bus, which is already out there. So far as they're going to follow all protocols, visitor protocols and everything, to make sure that we keep the kids safe, and we, manage the people that come in there. They will go through the visitor protocols just like anyone else entering the building.
Okay, any further discussion, or are we good for consent? Mr. Cobb?
Yeah, the program is actually gonna be focused around Americana music, and it's gonna be broadcast on the radio station live, and it will be funded by sponsors, not by the school.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
All right, nobody's answering me. Consent? Okay, thank you. All right, item number 4, actually, it's item number 3. 2021-22, 22-23 school year calendar update. Mr. Gaines? Or Mr. Hickman, whoever wants it.
Dave, if you will, allow me to, jump on. No, I just want to, share the calendar update. Share the survey updates and let you know that we're still in the process of surveying. As you know, we were in between the calendar change to the other survey, so I've let this survey linger for some time, and then I will be, we'll be meeting, we're gonna get on the teacher council agenda this week, and then do a further follow-up meeting with those guys on the calendar committee, to look at any changes that we need to make to the calendars. I don't know whether right now, well, let me just show you the survey, and right now, you'll see that we only have about 3,000, about 4,000 responses, so I feel like it needs to stay out a little longer.
No, we're not gonna take any action, we're just,
Right.
we wanted to update us.
And that's, if you're okay with that, if you're okay with that, I know on our agenda timeline, we normally try to approve the calendar at the December board meeting, but if that's okay, we can continue to update it. We have 2 calendars out there, people know kind of what the calendar looks like. According to the survey, there are a few adjustments that we may make right now. As you look, the main things, people still prefer the fall break. They still prefer the week-long break at Thanksgiving. There are some people that prefer a 3-day break, but I guess they're the same ones that prefer a 5-day break. We did talk about the New Year's holiday falling on the weekend and maybe having an extra day on that Monday. We will, look at that adjustment. Parent-teacher conferences, initially more teachers wanted it during the day, but as more parents added on, it's switching more to the afternoon that people prefer. And then the abbreviated days, you see the response there, it's almost even. So we'll certainly can discuss that as we go into committee. So as you can see the majority of respondents right now are parents. And again, the total responses right now are around, 3,384. So I would personally like to see it stay out there a little longer and us do some more media push.
Yeah.
And then set a calendar committee meeting to actually, finalize some of the changes and bring it back.
Okay. Sounds good.
May I say something?
Yes, Ms. Kinzer.
And all the time I've been on the board, I haven't commented on those abbreviated days because I understand as parents where you all are coming from. But I have got to reflect on, as a teacher, what those abbreviated days mean. You have no idea what teachers are asked to do. There's nobody that walks in your room and says, can I help you put the chairs up? Can I clean the things? Can I inventory this? Can I make sure you've done this? It is unbelievable what has to, the floors have to be waxed, everything has to be put up. It's a long list of things that have to be done. And I'm telling you, on that last day of school, most teachers are there all day. That's just the way it is. And I understand where you all as parents are coming from, I do. But on the very last day of school, I don't think there's a lot of learning gonna go on anyway. And maybe it needs to, but I'm just wanna speak to you as a teacher, how important it is to be able to do those things. Teachers come and they spend their time, they spend their own money, they come before the school starts and get their rooms ready. the end of school, there's a push because you've gotta turn your keys in. So you've got to get all that done on that last day, and it's a lot. Am I not right? Okay, that's it. That's my final.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsey?
Mr. Gaines, were you talking about possibly bringing that back in 2 weeks to the, or 3 weeks, whenever the December board meeting is?
Well, yeah, what I'd like to, yes, 'cause I'd like to leave it out there a little longer. We can bring it back to the December work session. Yeah.
But the only comment I have on that is, because we're talking about 21, 22, and there's some parents that have to set their vacations in January. If there was any way we could vote on it in December, I'm fine with that, just to accommodate those people that have to set those vacation, I think there's some people who could benefit from knowing going into January what that schedule is as compared to not knowing until February. But if that's possible, and I realize that's a stretch, but personally, it really doesn't change a whole lot from year to year, so.
I can certainly try to push the committee meeting up, and if we can get there and defer, if the committee says feel like we're comfortable with results, I'm certainly, I haven't seen much pushback on the general format of the calendar over the past 10 years. There's been discussion about, extending PD days, whether or not, last year there were some adjustments made to the calendar, that they had a half a PD day and a 12 to 6 for parent-teacher conferences. We did put that in one of the calendars. That was one of the things I wanted to look at, but besides that, adjusting those days where we add the extra day, after New Year's because of the way the holiday falls, just making those adjustments. We could bring back 21, 22, for you for approval, and we could continue the discussion on 22, 23. I think we had said we wanted to just bring 2 years rather than one, so people would have a chance to have 2 school years out there.
Just for information's sake, if it is pushed to January, it would be on the 5th when that vote would take place. Ms. Irvin?
That was exactly what I was gonna say.
Okay. Do you think you can get it to us by the December meeting?
Like I said, I'll try to push the committee meetings up, and if the only thing I'd be uncomfortable with if I thought we just really had some unreadiness with just approving the calendar. Otherwise, we feel like we set a calendar that we like. We don't know what's gonna happen with COVID. We don't know that, but that would be the same thing as we did this year. We came back to you and asked to make a calendar adjustment.
Okay. Ms. Parker?
The one request that I would have is that whatever the calendar is and whatever these responses are, that it's loaded on the agenda in plenty of time. I don't like getting to the work session and seeing it put up on the screen. That's just me personally, because if I'm trying to prepare, and I felt like the last time that we got into a calendar discussion, we were presented with something that, you assume that this works. I'm pretty far away from that screen. There's a lot of factors that go into it. So in the interest of preparation, it'd just be better if it's on the agenda in time for us to look at least a week in advance, I think.
And I really wanted to, and I didn't put it on the agenda because we just didn't have a lot of, we're less than 10% response-wise, and so I didn't think it was valid at this point. So.
Well, if it's not valid to put on the agenda, then it's probably not valid to put up there right now either.
Well, I just wanted to show you progress, that's all, and let you know that this was the progress we had, and that's why I'm recommending we push it out a little further.
Okay.
So that I can bring you those responses on the work session agenda in December. But I'll defer to whatever the board wants, or try to.
Mr. Moore?
Thank you. So, I guess my question would be, differences in opinion aside on how things should go, I honestly don't think there's that big of a difference in what people are looking for here. So, is there something you're expecting to see that we can't get? Because I agree with Mr. Inslee, I'd really like us to kind of wrap this up before the end of the year. I don't see that there's some big hang-up here, to be honest. Do you feel like there's some other information you may get that we can't do that in December?
No, I don't think so. I'm just, it's just a number of responses, and that's simply why I didn't want to put that out there yet. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. We'll plan on having something for us in December to vote on. All right. Next item is the COVID update. nothing's going on with that, so let's skip that one. We moved that to consent.
Move COVID.
Oh, wait a minute,
No,
whoa. Oh, no.
We got an MOU.
Yeah, that's not on the one right here I'm looking at. Yes, 3.3.4 grant MOU.
This is the grant that we talked to you about with Verizon that will provide tablets for, Mount Pleasant Middle, Whitthorne, and, what's the other one? Cox, yeah. So, part of that requirement, we're in the final stages of getting approved, and we did, part of that grant approval process is to have the research MOU approved. Dr. Miller already approves all research in the district anyway, so we're bringing that to you in anticipation, so we won't be a stumbling block if we're in that grant approval, if we happen to be approved.
Okay, discussion? Consent? Mr. Moore?
So I think one of the questions I'd had when we talked about this before was, what happens when this is over? And that's always been my concern. And two things: what happens when it's over, and what are the costs that we're absorbing as a district on maintaining or anything to keep these going? Although the devices and the hotspots may be provided, we still got to support them, and that's been my concern. So what are the other costs here?
If we want to maintain those devices after the grant, there'll be older devices, there'll be ours to maintain, so we certainly would have to.
I'm less worried about the device than the fact that if we put something in somebody's hands, there's now an expectation that we have access to a device.
Right.
So it's not about just the device itself, it's the expectation of our students and our parents that we're going to have a device in that kid's hands, and then all of a sudden when this goes away, what happens then? That's my question.
Well, so right now, we're in the process of bringing the diploma plan to you that would have the typical renewal of all devices. We would just put their renewal in a different place than we would, because right now they have devices. We would, pending that, we don't want to ever say we're dependent on the grant. So right now, there would just be in the routine renewal process of, we just bought them through ESSER, so 3 to 5 years from now, we would want to renew those devices. So those schools, because they have those devices, would be pushed out in their process of renewal. So far as our input, we do have to provide a coach. They provide half of it, 25,000. We've already, all three of those schools are Title I schools. Before we even started the process, we already talked to them about that they may have to do some shifting in their Title I funds to create those funds where they could provide the other half of that coach. So that would be the money that would be incurred from those schools. And so they would have a technology coach. Any other device support, I can get Chris Sale to talk more about that, or Tommy's here? Okay, go ahead, Tommy.
So just to add on to that, obviously, a lot of devices coming in the district, a lot of federal money. Mr. Perriman and myself, we've had many conversations like, what is it going to take? They're all new right now. What's going to start happening? We support them now. So there are some discussions on how many people is this going to take with all these new devices. And along with those, which we've had discussions before, we need to find a way to put technology money where it's going to be there, just like a light bill every year. But we do foresee there would be additional staff, whether it be technology people, student information people. We are working to try to get some comfortable numbers to where we can come back. So that is, obviously when everything's new, for the most part, you figure you're going to at least have a high percentage rate of everything working every single day. And when things start getting a year old, 2 years old, it does take additional people, which we are still working on that, but obviously thinking about that for next budget cycle.
So what I'm hearing is specifically, we don't have a hard number on that, but the realization is that when we add devices, we are adding those kind of costs. And I appreciate that. I know it's kind of hard to do. To go back to this, something you just said concerns me a little bit. So I'm worried that if the push is on devices right now, if we're saying, hey, we've got to find that portion of that 25,000 portion of that's got to come out of title money, what are we then giving up on the title side? And I just want to make sure that we're not just saying as a district, hey, we're really pushing technology at all costs, and we're actually giving up something that school made it, because I don't know what those things are, and are you comfortable with what those things are going to be, what we're giving up?
So what we looked at in the past typically is we look back on the Title I budgets for those schools. They typically bought new equipment, $10,000-ish for new Chromebooks or new whatever. So that would be where they would take that money. They wouldn't have to allocate the funds to purchase new Chromebooks out of Title I. They could use that money. Plus, we do have district Title II funds that could be used for coaching type things, so we could add to it. If some school really got into something where they really needed something else, but that's the kind of thing we ask schools to really look at prior to them saying, hey, we're in for this grant. We ask them to go back to their school teams to really...
I guess just as a board, my feeling on that is I just want to be very careful that we don't kind of say, hey, this is the big push for technology and you might have to give up something else. I just want to be very careful.
Right.
Because I could see if were I a principal at one of those title schools, if I'm being told I've got to find a way to find the money for this, I may be giving up something that's actually seeing real educational gains in that school. And I just want to be careful that that's not pushed too hard and that we balance that out. I'm just one board member again, but that makes me nervous.
That was the conversation we did have with principals before we even said they were eligible because they were Title I schools, but that was the conversation we had before we moved forward.
And I'm glad you said what you said, because personally, I would rather us not use title funds to purchase any devices. This is something that is as basic as a textbook, as basic as a desk, as basic as a pencil. And when we use title funds to buy it, we in the district can't use that in our numbers. So we basically are using title funds to buy a device. We basically have to match that with a device of our own. We can't say, oh, well, McDowell, for instance, they're 100%, have a device. We still have to provide them a device on the district side. Those devices do not count in our numbers. So I would rather use that money for something like this, where they're using a coach or whatever to get these devices. I would really like to discourage the use of title funds for those buying those devices, because it's not an effective use of our money, in my opinion.
All right, so we ready to proceed, maybe not put it on consent, but have it as a vote, standalone vote at the board meeting? Okay, that's the direction we'll head with that. Now for the long-awaited COVID-19 update.
All right, first of all, I do apologize getting that attachment, but this was just sent to us yesterday. And the first thing I want to speak about is the Binax Now test. I kind of told you guys a little bit about it earlier, was the state was going to start pushing the rapid test into the schools. We've met as a COVID team and with the nursing, and this is kind of a FYI. We do not think it is wise to set up any kind of protocols to test students nor staff. However, we do feel that we would like, talking to Nurse Diane Alley, that we would like to go ahead and request some of those tests just to have on hand, just for something that may come up. So our intention is to just request a nominal amount just so the nurses can have on hand. If you look at the document, it kind of goes through who can be the tester, what all it takes, and what it means. But once again, this was just a FYI, and unless the will of the board wants to speak for that, we just do not feel it wise as to committing to saying that's something we're going to do as a system. It brings up too many problems, especially when you get to the student and getting consent. Plus, the validity of some of these tests, even the folks that spoke to us, is kind of not as good as what they call the gold standard test. So I did want to bring that to you and let you see that and let you know what we're intending to do with that. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about is, okay.
I'm so sorry, but I do have a question. I agree with everything you said. I was worried about the liability, worried about the parental aspect of it, but another thought that popped in my mind, and that's something you may can clarify, is do we have to be completely all in on this, or can we just, because I think about the parents who maybe don't have the resources to get their kids to the doctor financially, and maybe if we have one that, even if, I don't know how it can work, but even if we could provide it to the parent to do the tests themselves, is that an option, no, or?
No, the parent cannot do it. It has to be a medically certified person, and they have to go through the said training in the document. And Nurse Alley agreed that it's probably an easy training for them to go through, and she was the one that stated it might be a good idea just to have some in reserve. That might be an incident where, you know, we can talk to the nurses and just say a parent, because right now the testing is offered free anyway at the health department. But she just wanted to make sure to have that cachet. But I will go ahead and tell you in foreshadow, it will be a discussion we will probably be having come April, and I just want it on your radar, is they're already talking about when a vaccine does come out, they're discussing making it happen through schools. And we are really concerned about that as a superintendent group across the state. Just letting you kind of know, hopefully that won't happen, but TOS, the Organization for Superintendents, has brought that up to our attention. So just giving you a little forethought on that.
Is there any action we need to take on the test issue?
Not unless there's, the board's will is something different than what I've already said.
Mr. Moore?
The same caution I've given all along is I'm always cautious when we get into a realm that just really is in our wheelhouse. And although I see some benefits here, I see some various ways to play out, the bigger concern for me is we're now giving medical diagnoses without follow-up medical support, and it's way out of where we need to be, and that just makes me very nervous as a school district. I'd rather us focus on education than try to get into something. And I know there's some benefits, but that's just not where we need to be.
Didn't I hear you say we're not gonna implement a regular
No, we're not going to implement it.
protocol?
Just the nurses have asked that
Just to have them on hand.
on hand for whatever reason, just
All
in
right.
case.
Any other conversation? Mr. Lindsay?
And what is that reason they would want some on hand?
It may be a staff member that's iffy, they don't know, maybe they just want to, instead of having missing, class, they may say, hey, can you do a test for me? Something like that of that nature.
That, it's been, the hospital's been giving tests, rapid tests at Murray County Park 3 or 4 days a week, and it was my understanding through that what they were telling everyone, that the rapid test, if you're not showing symptoms, you're not gonna test positive. So, with those being rapid tests, I'm just, right, I mean, I don't, if somebody's there with a fever, we need to send them home anyways.
That is correct.
And if they're not, then, as Mr. Howell just said, we can swab them, and they may test negative, but, and I'm not telling war stories, but I'm getting over COVID myself, and I infected people before I showed symptoms, I know I did. I don't see a ton of value in those rapid tests right now for us as a school system.
Mr. Moore?
To follow up what I commented on a minute ago, if we do even just get some of these on hand, please have some procedures in place for the expectations of what we're doing with those. Because I have a feeling we're walking right into another mess of just to have them on case, and we use one on one employee, and we have no protocols in place for what that looks like, what the expectations of the employees are. And I just think, again, we're getting out of our lane. I don't know why we'd want to. In my opinion, I don't think you should even get them on hand if you're not gonna already have all that stuff lined up and ready to go. Because if I'm an employee, I have no clue what you're gonna do with that, or what my expectations are as an employee. So I just would caution you, if you're gonna get into it, you better have the procedures, as we've been talking about all night, in place before you dive into it.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to zoning and facilities, Mr. Perriman.
Okay.
Is that really all the COVID-19 update we got? Because I have a feeling there's probably more to talk about, other than just that.
Yes, there is a couple other things, but, you know, one of the things that we're looking at, since we did pivot this week to our, district closure, we kind of saw that coming. We thought it was gonna come Friday. We really thought it was Friday, because the numbers that we had with the health department was matching up to last Tuesday, and then they started to not match up, because we kept showing where the cases were climbing, and they were showing they were dropping. And when we reached out to the health department, they kind of verified what we had thought, was that they were kind of lagging behind because so many people had been testing. So when it happened, you know, one of the things we're looking at was we were going into a 4-day week before we were out for a whole week, would give us 2 weeks. One of the things that we're doing right now is we're looking at other ways, as Ms. Parker had brought up at the very start of this, is how can we implement if we get to this point and still have our K2, K4 come to school? So we've been working on that. Honestly, we've been working on that for a while now. The AB schedule sounds great, but there's a lot of hurdles when we look into the elementary schools, and we're trying to figure out what we're gonna do with that. And, Mr. Gaines has been tasked with some of that, trying to figure out what is a workable way to get especially the K2 back in when we may have to pivot the rest of the district. Also bringing up, and this is a very sore subject, but, we are getting a lot of pressure right now from the teachers about looking again at possibly bringing the mask issue back up before you guys. And so that's something you may want to consider moving forward. We talked about, possibility of including it into our, plan, where if we hit a certain limit, maybe we can do that to keep kids in a little bit longer. So pretty much that, it's been a very busy week, busy past couple of days, because like I said, the AB schedule, we thought it would fit just like a Lego block, and it's just a lot of problems, and I'm gonna let Mr. Gaines kind of speak to that.
Just some of the initial concerns, of course, is with devices and trying to set the right. We all know that in schools that let me say it first. Now that we've been through this, at least every school's had the opportunity to experience students in remote. So when we had at the principals meeting, we had a focus meeting talking about things we could do differently, things we could improve. We got a lot better input because everybody had experience having classes in remote or whole schools in remote. We do know that there are some places in elementary school where if we had devices, lessons could occur, and we think that occurs better the older the grades are, in grades 3 and 4. We really still think in grades K through 2 that kids need to be at school. Some of the roadblocks with doing an AB schedule and devices is, teachers having to do multiple preps. If you got an AB schedule, you're preparing for those students. You also have inherent, depending on your schedule, you have remote students that you have to prepare for. And then we still, one of the big things is dealing with students in transition that are, they're in person and they get contact traced and they're home for 14 days and then they're returning, dealing with those students. We know we try to have consistent curriculum, but it's a different preparation when you're preparing for a student going home versus a student being in person. So certainly, some of that is coming to play. One of the things we tried to help with remote students, we're contracted with some teachers to prepare a generic packet because if we think about a student going home sick, it may be easy for us to prepare some things to hand on to say work on that, but when you talk about preparing lessons, it's different. You have to, so think about videotaping or for students that don't have those devices, how do we prepare that lesson so that the kids can be engaged or the parents that's with them can be engaged and that lesson syncs with that packet that we prepare. One of the things we've got a group of teachers that are kind of working together to prepare those packets and the videos that this would be for our remote students that are remote in elementary. So that way we would have those packets ready to be distributed. So preparing packets is one thing, and then also putting those together and running them off is another part of that. In the event that we would have to stay pivoted 100% remote, packet production will become an issue. So we talked to schools about that. That would essentially have to be handed back to them because of we would not be able to keep up with the producing that many of packets in the central office. We handle the remote packet production right now, but trying to do that, for the whole district would be insurmountable. Just having to keep up with it, just running the packets off, trying to get them out in a timely manner, we could not do that with the 2 copiers that we had. So we're trying to work through that. We're also really trying to focus in on what would AB look like. If we did ABE as a system, if we did AB as maybe an elementary school. There are concerns with that, if 5 through 12 is remote, or if we think by the end of the year we will have devices all the way down to 3rd grade. We've secured enough devices through grants, and depending on when they come in, we think we have enough devices now to get them out to by the end of this year, we'll have them out to 3rd grade. So, with that, we do have, in our grant funds left, we have, about $180,000. We wouldn't be able to fulfill a grade level, but we could purchase some more devices. And we will, as I said before, we'll continue to look at what other opportunities we have to do that. But, that's a balance with whether or not we want to bring K through 2 kids, continue to bring them to school, or try to set up some situation where the K through 2 kids that were in school, they would be with us, and the ones that weren't, maybe we could issue them the device, or maybe we could have some devices to issue out in the event someone was pivoted to remote, so there at least would be some assistance. That's kind of the things that we're thinking about right now. We intend to work definitely to have a logistical A-B schedule, at least to present by, to be ready to go in January in the event that we, the case count stayed up, and we would, but one of those things is that's just that mix of kids. So, some of those options of, we're gonna survey parents and ask them, if we went to AB, would you consider bringing your kid back to school and not being remote, because we would be able to have less kids? So that may be an option we ask, so that it would be more consistent in our instruction. Having kids remote, kids AB, certainly creates a lot of different opportunities, different scenarios for teachers, and that's what we're trying to make things more consistent for teachers.
Mr. Moore.
So I've got a couple of things to go over here, so you to bear with me just a minute. Mr. Gaines, on the AB, so the way you're talking about the AB schedule, are you really in favor of that, or are you just doing that because that's kind of what people are looking for? And I'm just being blunt talk here, because it seems like you don't think it's the best option. Well,
so it's an option to continue instruction with less children. We'd be able to social distance, so we could continue in instruction. We are looking at that because, in my opinion, we don't think that case count's going to go down.
Okay.
And
that's
so
fair.
we have to we're trying to look at other options to continue to have children in school.
Okay. So to go with that, I guess, because it seems like kind of a little bit of a mixed message. I'll just be honest, when I'm hearing you describe it, you say we're looking into it, but you seem to be giving quite a few reasons of why you think it's a bad idea. I'm just trying to understand that. To go with that, and I'll carry that over when it comes to mixed messages and communication in general. Mr. Hickman, if you feel like you need to bring this board a request to do a mask mandate, even though I'm guarantee you I'm one of the people that's going to say no on it, I expect you to bring that to us. Because and my expectation is you, as the superintendent, is to bring what you think is what is the best course of action for this district, regardless of how I agree or disagree. So that's my expectation. So I hope you would, if you feel like through your communications that is what's needed, you should be bringing that to us. But I think that kind of goes with this. I was a little disappointed with when we called school off after school yesterday, I'll be honest. I was a little disappointed that it kind of seemed like it was pushed over to the 1% number, especially when, as you're telling me, you guys had kind of been talking for 3 or 4 days that you knew this was coming. Because what I heard from both parents and teachers is they kind of felt blindsided with this. And I know we kind of pushed that off to being the responsibility because, the numbers come in late from the county on that. But to be honest, from the beginning of this, the 1% was a soft number anyway. We always gave ourselves a little bit of room as a board because frankly, we could have closed at .95 We could have closed at 1.05. So I guess what I'm getting to on that is that I would really like some more decisiveness from us. If 4 days ago you thought this was what we should have been doing today, or, you know, we should have been out today, I really felt like it should have been started to be communicated. Because again, as a parent too, I feel like some teachers kind of knew this was coming and maybe their principals prepared them with that, but I also felt like some teachers were completely blindsided by this. And I think the net effect was there's chaos, and I think we could have avoided a lot of that if we had been more decisive and pushed out some information and communicated better. Now, you may disagree with that, but I feel like communication could have been improved on this to kind of get people prepared for what was going on. 'Cause, you know, closing and then people coming back the next day to pick up packets, it seems very, especially when you're telling me you've been aware for several days that this was probably going to happen. That makes it make even less sense to me. So let me move to one more thing on that. I'll get past that part. I had asked this from the beginning. As we got into remote and as we had students going out, have you guys been, you said you've had some principals meetings where you collaborated. I know there are teachers out there that are knocking it out of the park with this, that are doing individually an awesome job. There are also teachers that are really struggling with this. Have we found a way to glean from those teachers that are knocking it out of the park and share that throughout the district? Because I don't feel like we have, because I feel like at this point, some of those people that are knocking it out of the park should have been able to share that information, and we could, as a district, maybe adopt those things as procedures. Hey, this is working really good. Let's push that out to these other schools. And I think it would probably give a big life wrap to some of these teachers that are like, I don't have a clue. Because I'll be honest, I don't think I would have a clue how to manage some of this stuff. So are we doing that? Because it still feels like we're not on the same page. It feels like there's pockets of people doing a really good job, and there's pockets of people that are struggling. And I would really think that as a district, we could get together and help us all do a better job at it.
I first want to respond to getting everybody prepared. When we did know this was coming, we did pull the principals in for an emergency meeting. We told them that they need to be getting teachers prepared. That was put out to the principals Wednesday of last week when we saw this might become a reality. We also sent out a district-wide message to parents to remind them that this could be a reality too. So we tried to make sure everybody let everyone know that this is coming. I really wanted to try to keep these kids in as much as I can. I do not like having kids being out of school. They need to be here. So we were really on the front lines trying to let everybody get prepared and know this is a reality now. Going back to what you were saying about gleaming other teachers, we have, and I think Mr. Gaines talked about it before, we're pulling some teachers. We're going to have them start doing some things for us. They're going to already have some uploading, I believe, on the diploma website of some of the things they can use for that. We've been working through technology. I've let all principals know that I've spoken with that if you need somebody from tech to come spend a whole day, let me know, and we can make that happen as well. But are we doing a great job with it? No, because right now, with most teachers, even the ones that are knocking it out of the park, they will tell you they are just I think my favorite quote so far is, as I'm treading water and only one nostril is above. And that's what most teachers will tell you right now. So it's really hard to pull some of these teachers from that kind of stuff. So what we're trying to do is have those videos, have the how-tos, pushing in our tech folk, trying to help every way we can.
Thank you, Mr. Fulbright. As you know, I sent an email today about this. It's a very real concern for a lot of parents, and what I'm hearing, and I'm afraid, and I know none of us want to go there, is that I think a lot of parents are fearing, it's too early to judge because we're just right here on the brink of it, but they're fearing that we're going to go down the March through May path that we went, which was see you later, you know. And parents are really expressing their concerns. So, number one, as a board member, I want to know what I can do to help you and the teachers, and I need to know the realities of that, because I think, again, and I know, understand money and such, but we have to deal with the hand we're dealt, and if we're going to have to purchase devices to make educating these children a part of our reality, then that's something I want you to bring before me too. Second thought is, had some people on the phone today, and again, like you have all mentioned, you've got some hitting it out of the park and some appearing to be absent, like not even barely contacting the kids, just come get your packet and that's it. And the just come get your packet, that's it, is not perceived as a good, it's just not perceived well. And I'm wondering, is there a way for our teachers to potentially survey their students that they have at home? Because in the world we live in, I would dare to say, I would think half of these kids, that's my probably maybe ignorant perception, but my guess would be half of these kids have something, whether it be an iPad or a parent's computer, iPhone, something, where these teachers can do an interactive platform with the resources that those children have. I would like for you to think about that and maybe see how to interact with those kids, because had a parent call me like literally on the way to the meeting tonight and said, these videos I'm getting literally is just telling the kids what the answer is. It's showing them and saying, okay, on this packet, it's, you should have marked B. And she's like, my kid's not learning anything. And I asked her, did you learn anything? She's like, no, I just marked B. So I want to make sure, and I know, because I've been in the classroom, and I feel for our teachers, because I know how hard it is in the whole world of what's out there to find the perfect resource to get in the hands. Spot on, but I want us to think about that. Anyway, in addition to what I said, that was kind of my thoughts.
I just want to make some comments. We see and hear a lot of griping and fussing about remote, but as a parent of 3 kids that have been on remote, I've had some on remote for 3 weeks now, I can't say enough good about it. I mean, it's, my 11-year-old wakes up every morning, eats breakfast, and he knows his first meeting's at 8 o'clock, and he's on his computer, and is it ideal? No, it's not. But it's not going to be. It just can't be. And I don't know. I think no matter how hard we try, it's not the same as in-person instruction, and there's nothing we can do to make that. And I get that some people are knocking it out of the park and some aren't, but there's some people that knock it out of the park in the classroom, and there's some that don't in the classroom too. So I don't know how different that really is, but I just wanted to add that in as a parent, that I can't, I have a first grader, and there's just so much that can be done. There's only so long she can sit still, and so I don't pin that on anybody. I actually have to compliment remote learning from my experience from it, but I wanted to comment on kind of what Mr. Moore was hitting on. I do wish that, and you 2 guys are sitting there, you 3 guys, and you guys are going to take the punches, but I'm not sure that they're directed at you, but I am a little concerned that we're in November and we still don't have some things figured out, that we don't, because I think we all knew this day was coming. We didn't know when it was, but Mr. Moore used the word decisiveness, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for perfection, because no matter what we do, there's no playbook for this, and we can be prepared and we can roll something out, but inevitably we're going to screw something up, and that's just the nature of this. And I don't have a problem with that as long as we recognize that and fix it and go on. But I hope moving forward, and especially in the next semester, it's apparent that after Thanksgiving holidays, we're fixing to get another spike, and then after Christmas holidays, we're going to get nailed again with this stuff. But whatever it is, I'm not smart enough to figure that out. That's what you guys get paid to do. But I just hope we're ready to roll with it. Let's make it happen. If we screw something up, step back and punt and fix it. But let's just be decisive about what we do. And again, as Mr. Moore said, if AB schedule's not the way you guys think we need to go, let's don't do it. But if A/B schedule is the way that we need to go, let's figure out how to make it happen and make it happen quickly. If you guys think it's best to keep K through 2 in school and send everybody else remote or do everybody else A/B, fine, just own it. Let's be decisive about it and roll. And again, all I ask is when we figure out what the hiccups are, that we do our best to change those. But I know as a board member that we're not gonna get this right 100% of the time, just because there's no answers to this. But whatever we do, I just want us to own it, be decisive about it. I differ from Mr. Moore a little bit. Yesterday, we find out that, the numbers come in and we're over 1% at 3:30. I love that we banged it right then. I didn't wanna wait till today, and that's the kind of decisiveness that I hope we use moving forward. And I get that was a soft number, and you guys may look back on it and say, I wish I'd done it different, but I think we can learn as we go. But I just hope that whatever decision we make, that you guys make, that, hey, we think this is best, you own it and roll with it. It's not the worst thing in the world to look back and say, we should have done something different, so.
Thank you, Ms. Parker.
I do want to commend the teachers for being flexible, and the administrators for being flexible. And I probably fall more in line with Mr. Moore on the decision and when the decision was made, just from the standpoint of, when I was looking at the numbers last week, I was like, we're not going to be in school all next week. But when my kids came home at 3:30, they didn't have all the stuff that they needed. They couldn't work on it first thing today. They didn't know when their meetings were going to be, and that's not a fault of their teachers. It's a fault in that, you just said it, Mr. Gaines, you said that it's different preparing for students in person versus remote. And I'm gonna speak specifically on elementary, because I think it's a little different than high school and middle school. But when you're talking about what we said we're going to do for elementary, is we're going to do packets, which means things have to be printed off, things have to be gathered up. And you just said central office can't do all that. So that falls back on the teachers. But as a teacher, I bet we would have had teachers in Friday. If the decision was made on Friday, I bet they would have been ready Monday morning at 8 o'clock. Because the decision was made essentially at 4 o'clock on Monday, I didn't get to pick up packets for my kids until afternoon today. And that was frustrating for them, because then they're trying to cram in a whole day's work that they could have been working on all day. And I think, too, you have to remember, elementary school teachers are not going to plan in-person classes and a packet and use up all their copies, because don't they have a set number of copies that they can produce as well? So they're not going to use up, so that, packets are just going to basically be discarded for students if we don't pivot to remote that particular day. So I think we just need to, I guess I've been advocating for AB for elementary, because I do think that kids need to be in school in elementary. No, Wayne does not want me teaching his first grader how to read. That's not my wheelhouse. Just ask my children. So I think we have teachers that they want our kids in class. The communication that we get from the teachers, I feel like, has been great. And I do feel like, Marlena, what we had in March was terrible. And I have full confidence that it is better. Is it the best it could be? No, it's not the best it can be, but it's better. And I hope it can get even better than what it is. But I also agree, I don't see an end to this in the near future under the current model that y'all presented to us, as far as what our numbers have to be and when we go back. So if that's the case, I would love for y'all to bring back what we can do to get kids back in school. If that does mean when we get to a certain number, we require a mask. If that does mean, AB days. Personally, I'll be honest with you, I don't want to pay a bunch of extra money for cleaning supplies right now. Sorry, Mr. Berryman. I don't really think it does any good. I don't think it's that much better than what it was before. I do think, too, because of the additional requirements for teachers to plan 4 remote, 4 in-person, 4 potentially AB day. I mean, I'm fine with looking at potentially having flex days in there where teachers have a day where they can just plan for kids. As a parent, whatever we get that produces a better product, I think parents are going to be okay with that. So those are just some of my thoughts on it, because it's definitely, we're still going to have to be doing some retooling. I think it's just where we are.
Ms. Irvin?
I just wanted to go on record to say that I hope all of you know that my intent was not to talk derogatory about any one set of teachers. I just wanted it to be stated that K through 4 teachers are the most concerned, because I agree. I've got to have to think of what they're in now. Goodness, I have a 6th grader and a 9th grader, and they've been remote even prior to this, and I think the teachers have done wonderful. And I think a lot of them definitely need commending for that they've done a great job. I just know that the parents in the lower grades in their fear, because they don't have where they can see their teacher. And like Mr. Lindsay said, my kids have been in front of a computer talking to their teacher all day and their classmates, and that's good for not only education but also the social emotional factor of getting to see the other children. I also you know, it's easy for us to get caught up in talking negatives, but, you know, I personally, when the call came out yesterday at 4 o'clock and we found out at 3:30, I had empathy for you on that, because I know that the numbers, they fluctuate. I know we get backlogged over the weekend and then they all hit. But my question is this, and like I say, I fully defended that too. You know, when we found out the numbers, we closed them. But with that 1% rule that we put in place, would it have been possible for us to have brought back a population of kids and let them get their things and just had them in there one more day? Or was it where when it hit that 1%, then it was like, don't come in this building? I'm not real clear myself of how that works, but I do think giving the kids time to get what they need is always helpful as well.
You know, and I'll kind of speak to a little bit of everything, was to go back in the preparedness. You know, it's stinks, and I can't say it enough. I want kids in school, but to be transparent to parents, when we said we were going to do something, they were counting on it. When we crossed that number, the teachers, the staff, the parents were counting. When we hit that number, this is what we're going to do. So as soon as we found out that number, like I said, we started warning. We told parents to tell teachers to be prepared, because this is probably going to happen. We sent out a message to parents. So we wanted to prepare everybody that this was about to happen. Did it happen in a way that was the best possible way? No, it did not. You know, I wish those numbers would come into us at lunch, but they come in at about 3 to 3:30 is when we get them. I agree. You know, we make decisive decisions every day, so many of them that you forget half of them because we do it. The reason we bring in front of you is we've made the decision we're going to go with packets. We don't feel that works. We're living it. We've seen it the last 4 months. Now that's why we're in discussion about what are we going to do next. To be honest, what I'm going to bring back to you is we found out today some positive news. It looks like we're going to be able to possibly cover down from 3 through 12 on devices. So my recommendation, as soon as we get those devices out, I will have K2, when we hit this point, have K2 in the school building. And 3-5, we'll let them go virtual. But it all pivots on things change every day. Device counts, trying to make sure we have enough devices. You know, that's nobody's fault. I'm not pointing my finger at anyone. We got what we got. And we make these decisions, critical decisions, every day. Not everybody's going to agree with the decisions. Not everybody's going to like the decisions, but we make them. And we do them with so rapid, sometimes we even have to take a step back and ask ourselves, was that the right thing to do? Because we had to make it so rapidly. I just go back. Our philosophy is we're going to do everything we can possibly do to be, one, transparent to the people of Murray County as well as our teachers, follow and do what we say we're going to do. And that's what we did yesterday. but we did try to prepare everybody leading up to that. 2, we're gonna try to do everything we can to keep these kids in schools. It has been a nightmare on the staff at central office, the administrators, and the teachers when we're looking at just pivoting classes instead of schools, instead of grade levels. Many districts you look at right now, they have a class problem, they cancel the whole school. We don't do that. We want our schools to be in session. We make these decisions every day. And if you would, when school comes back in, I would invite you guys to, any day you want, come at 3 o'clock and watch how that works. And we involve every principal in our decisions because they know their school's the best. So, answer your question, if we were going to tell the parents we're gonna do one thing and do something different, yes, we could have done that. But I just felt like we had to be transparent and be honest in what we say we're gonna do, we do it.
Yes, sir. Well, I appreciate it, and like you say, I just want you to know, and I want all of our faculty to know that from my perspective, and I think I could speak on behalf of the board, that we know this is a hard time and we really do appreciate it, but like you guys, we want to work through it with you and help any way we can, so thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Sims, and we're gonna start to wrap this up, because I think we're talking around the same thing here, but Mr. Sims, we haven't heard from you yet tonight. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, I guess I got 2 points. If my memory serves me correct, the 1% was not supposed to be an automatic closure. Whenever you said yourself that was gonna be a revisiting point for the district, and that may have been what you did, and you revisited it and decided to close it, and which is okay, but you just said that everyone expected once we hit that was automatic closure. That was not the purpose of the 1%, from what I remember. That may have been what the mayors or whoever thought it was, but that was not. Other point, how are we going forward planning on keeping teachers accountable for making sure they are providing the instruction online? I've been getting some reports of my students spending 6 minutes in a classroom a day. I mean, what is that teacher doing beyond teaching 6 minutes 4 times a day if that's happening? How are we making sure the teacher is accountable?
So, yeah, on that part, especially with devices, using our software, we have things like ClassLink that tells us actually how long students were on. So, looking at those reports, principals already have that ability for students that have devices to look at, how long were the students on. That's kind of a signal. Also, our observation protocols now support remote learning, so principals increase those observations. Before, as we went to remote learning, we sent out those expectations again to principals to share with teachers. Again, we are, even as you guys know, things change about the way we did stuff. Maybe this type of instruction way we did it didn't work, so we're meeting with principal small groups again, tomorrow to talk with them. And also, I didn't tell Mr. Hickman that, but we're going to get on his agenda with the teacher council just for us to, look at our expectations and say, are there things we can do differently that we need to send back out to everybody for those expectations? I agree, in some places that expectation needs to be raised, that it is. Does it need to be an hour having kids online? No. But they do need to have an engaging instruction point with their class, and then pivot to or give kids an assignment where they can work with other kids and but we realize this is hard, when you're trying to work for a group, do a lesson, and then coordinate with a small group so I can reach out to them. That's a lot of, it's a lot of work. So we're trying to help teachers do that better and trying to support them in that effort also, so that we can continue to engage kids and we can continue to look at ways where we can continue instruction.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Moore, you have the last word.
All right, just 2 things. One, and I do actually appreciate the conversation. There's been several opinions on things, but I think it's been a kind of a fruitful conversation of what the focus is. I don't think anybody's throwing blame at anybody on this. I understand, and everybody understands, this is a mess. I'm kind of concerned with one main thing. When we have hiccups, when we have things that are going wrong, how are we responding? That's really the big thing. What are we learning from it, and how quickly are we moving on and fixing the problem? Which is really that's all anybody can ask for right now on that. To go with that, I'll ask I hope you guys are looking ahead. We said we're gonna come back on the 30th, or I guess it'd be the 1st. I don't know which way y'all are. I didn't know how to read that, by the way. What I would hope is that you guys are planning, what does it look like if we don't go back? And we as a district have thought that through and what that looks like and have some planning in place for that. Frankly, I know this is way out there. What if we don't go back in January? And again, I'm looking at these things because I would hope that as a central office, you guys are looking at these things and maybe not spending days planning this out, but at this point, having some conversations on what the framework looks like at least, and then you can start to build on that as it gets closer and if it looks realistic. That's really what I'm asking for. I think other board members are kind of looking for, is to make sure that we are staying on top of that. I appreciate the explanations of what you said you were doing. I just hope we can all, I think everybody's giving grace with what's going on with this. Be decisive, continue to be flexible, and if there's something you are think is advocating is the best for these kids, please let us know. And one last thing, Marlena, she asked us to, I say again, as a board, please come to us immediately with what we can do to help, whether that be to help the teachers, to make this happen, devices, whatever it is. If it needs to be a special call meeting immediately, if it needs to happen, that's really what our goal here is as a board. Our task is to facilitate making sure this happens. So if there's something that comes up, please make it happen immediately. Thank you.
Mr. Lindsey.
Just a procedural question, and maybe this is because I wasn't here when the CLP was developed, but if you guys decide that an A-B schedule is the right thing to do, or you decide that you want to send K-2 in person and everybody else remote, or whatever you guys come up with, is that even a question that is that even something that we need to weigh in on as a board, or is that just a decision that you guys?
That's what they get paid for. All right.
Just to speak on that, what the board has asked for is just keep informed, so that's what we try to do.
Thank you very much. All right, I think we about solved the COVID problem. Mr. Perriman, we'll move on to zoning and facilities.
Good evening. I'll bring you good news first. We went to the county commission, budget meeting last week and then back to the full commission meeting last night. They did, unanimously approve both our EESI lighting with about $1,073,000, and then for Santa Fe, we asked for 2.856, something like that. They approved a $3 million loan to us, or a loan that they will take out and they will give to us, with the understanding that money that is above the cost of the project, we can go back and ask them to use that additional money for additional projects in the future. I do want to let you know, and Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, there is conversation in the referendum that they wrote to borrow that money, in which they can come back and ask you, we will get a guaranteed savings off of the energy updates at Santa Fe. It won't be a huge number, it'll be a small number each year, but they can come back and ask for you to agree to maybe put that money towards the payment of the loan. It wouldn't be a large number, and we talked to them. We didn't see that as being a horrible request to you guys, but it would be yours. So, but they did leave that in their referendum. So I don't know if they will, I don't know if they won't, but I just didn't want you to be caught off guard later on that that's what they did. But they did fund that. I believe they funded it on a 7-year loan, and we will finalize that by the end of this year, and hopefully have everything moving forward to be on complete schedule for next year.
Mr. Moore.
Yeah, can they, so I get the request, I understand that they can make the request, but that's us moving funds back to them. Wouldn't that have to come back to us to approve that?
It will.
And wouldn't we have to reapprove it every year?
No, it's a one-time MOU as long as the debt's outstanding, so it will be for the term of.
So it's written like it's actually we're paying on the loan.
It's written that they have it's not written that you're gonna do it, but that they could come back and ask for that, give you the option for that MOU.
For what length of time?
and I believe they discussed the length of the loan, which would be the 7 years.
Okay.
And we are working, it'll take us about 6 weeks to get a guaranteed savings off of what that would be. If it's in line with other projects we've done, you're looking somewhere maybe 10 to 15,000 a year, somewhere through there.
All right,
For just clarification, 10 to 15,000 a year, the debt payment's gonna be 368,000 a
Yeah.
year.
okay, thank you very much. Mr.
But
Chairman,
I just didn't
continue.
want you to be caught off guard if that request did come back. But they did 21-0, they were short one member last night on both of those, approved those. Just a notification, the projects you approved last month at Whitthorne, we have already begun work on, and this actual break without students will speed us up on some of the work that we've done. So from the operations side, it helps us with our timeline. And the last thing, just as I mentioned, and I know Mr. Parkhurst is listening because he's already commented to me 2 or 3 times on things y'all have said tonight. We are gushing blood from food services. You know, we talk about monies that are budgeted, and in our 141 fund, we have budgeted for bus drivers, we've budgeted for different things. Please remember, his budget is one that builds up and has to self-fund. And when we are in school, right now with our low numbers, we are not making food cost and payroll every day. And when we have left school, we are making no money every day, and we still have payroll. We have cut his staff as deep as we feel we can and still operate. And our fear is any deeper cut to his staff, if we pivoted back to school, we wouldn't have the staff to operate the cafeterias because we feel they'll leave. So, I don't say that as at this moment anyone needs to do anything, but as we move forward, the longer this process keeps us out of school, we're really gushing a lot of money from that side of the house right now.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsey.
Give an idea what a lot, are we talking about?
He's gonna hit me up just as soon as I say thousands a day. Like, we're making half of what we need to every day. Doug and I discussed a number
Mr.
last
Laconi,
night.
can you fill us in?
So the previous month, September, we lost almost $700,000, and as of right now, we're losing $473,000 on this year to date total. So, our fund balance when we began the year was, 2.8 million. We are already down to 1 million, for restricted fund balance in that fund after we take the purchase orders out. So and we need those purchase orders. These are things we gotta buy. If we liquidate all of those purchase orders, we're still gonna be down almost $600,000. The 143 fund is a smaller fund, their total fund balance is, their amount of cash is only 2.3 million right now, and if they continue to gush money, as Eric has said, they're gonna run out after a while.
Are there any outstanding reimbursements? Just like, I know we're continuing to feed kids when we go remote. I'm assuming there was some type of reimbursement coming. Are there any outstanding reimbursements that we have?
There's a lag time always on what they say they're gonna send us and then actually sending us. But what we're seeing is, even with the reimbursement, participation is down so low. I'll give you an example. Brian and I have spoken pretty candidly about some schools. At Baker right now, we have a 4-person staff, and that's what it takes to feed both the in-school folks and the out-of-school folks, and we're not making enough today to pay the manager and the assistant manager. We're not covering their salaries every day. That's taking the other 2 employees completely out of the picture. So we're struggling with, what do we do? Again, because our fear is, we've cut positions, and we've cut as deep as we feel we can. If something, miraculous happened, which who knows? We haven't known for the last 6 months where we were gonna be at any point, and we pivoted and said, we're all back. Any deeper cut, we can't feed kids when they get back. So, again, we don't necessarily know the answer. It's gonna be as we play out. And I will give credit to Mr. Parkhurst. He has worked very hard to build that fund balance on their side up to where we're talking about at some point being in trouble when a lot of our neighbors are in trouble, and they're in bad trouble. So he's kind of been frugal and been very diligent about what he's done with his money, for an emergency time, and this is time. But I will say too, the domino of this is a lot of the things that he's been self-funding, replacing freezers, replacing kitchen equipment, those are things that he's no longer probably gonna be able to do, which again, isn't a tonight problem, but next year when a freezer goes out, it becomes a fund balance problem, probably from the general fund rather from him. So I just bring that up to you, just to say, when we close, it saves us money in fuel. The fuel's in the 141, he's in the 143, and we don't save in fuel what he's losing every day. So there's this pots of money, and that one is drying up pretty quickly.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question. So it appears, let's just use round numbers, that we're gonna be at $500,000, losing $500,000 for this semester. So let's just say next semester is twice as bad and we lose $1 million and we go $1.5 million in the hole. Can we, from an accounting standpoint, if we have savings in electricity and those type things, can we rescue that 143 fund by savings recognized in the 141 fund? Is that possible?
I would say it would be possible. The thing I would like to check before giving you a hard answer on that is because the food service does receive federal funds and state funds, so there may be some problems we'd run into by doing that, but my initial answer is yes, but let me get back to y'all on that. We'll be, we can make it another 2 weeks over there, definitely. Hopefully another, we hope to just not have to, but it would be good to have a backup plan just in case.
As we continue this discussion, just keep in mind, you said that there's nothing that we need to decide or take action on tonight. Okay.
No, sir. It was just an FYI.
So, an idea was shared with me, and I kind of thought it was worth at least discussing, is we're paying bus drivers, correct?
Correct.
So, why couldn't we deliver some meals to some people? I understand maybe not door to door, but there are bus stops that we could assign and say, hey, we're going to deliver 50 meals here and 50 meals here and 100 meals here. I think we probably have some other staff that maybe aren't doing as much right now. I say everybody's doing a lot, but I'm just saying, our teaching assistants, they could perhaps help out with that process. I'm just throwing some ideas out there. That idea was shared with me, and I thought it was a wonderful idea, because there are people, students, in our community that rely on that food that comes from our school system, and I would love for it to be accessible, because we can give it out of the school all day long. Many of our schools are not in walking districts. They can't walk to that school. They can't walk to Santa Fe or Culleoka or Hampshire or other schools. But we do have buses, and they do how many miles in a day?
11,000.
Yeah, so if they're just sitting there idle, they're not doing 11,000. If they're only going to run once, it's only 6,000. We still realize some diesel fuel savings, so just an idea.
One of the things, and he is working on that. When I talked to him yesterday afternoon when this decision was made, we have a staff meeting for operations in the morning, and we left our conversation yesterday with, we need to talk Wednesday morning, bring ideas on what we can do. One of the problems is, even though we've budgeted fuel money, you're gonna have to bail him out at some point possibly, and we may burn more fuel than we receive reimbursement for meals served. So it may be a situation where we do good, but if you look at it strictly from a money standpoint, you may not have the money in 141 to bail out the 143, and you actually lose money in some states, in some cases. So,
I would rather feed the kids.
It's two things.
I'd rather feed the kids. We can find the money. We're not a poor county.
Could you bring us back the result of that conversation tomorrow?
We will.
Thank
We
you.
will, yes, sir.
Yes, sir, and you have the last light on.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Perryman, can you help me understand, and I apologize that I'm not very knowledgeable on this. You said our participation is low, so help me understand and maybe help the parents understand. From what I'm hearing from that, are we reimbursed per meal we serve? So is it actually advantageous to us to serve like 400 meals per day versus 200 meals per day? That's something I think we need to put out there. Because like from my perspective, I'd be like, well, I don't really need it. I'm good, our family's doing fine, and I feel like I'm taken. So maybe if we can and maybe that's, you know, my part as a board member, but if we need to change that perception to help get our funding in place, I think we can line up some people to come get those meals gladly.
We'll bring you a plan. There's lots of layers to that, but we'll bring you some kind of
Thank you
idea
very
on
much.
that.
Can you proceed with your report?
Yes, sir. As far as, that was kind of good news from the commission last night. The FYIs there, the train report and the project cost report, you'll see that project cost report, change probably in January as the money for those two projects does appear on there. We have one bid tonight, 3.53 is a contracted, grounds maintenance. We went ahead and bid this, again, in anticipation of the coming year. And one of the things we asked was we would like to see this be a reoccurring, option over the next, 4 years. So what we have is that the Outsiders Property Management is the group that we currently use for our facilities. They did win the low bid process, and they gave us an option to renew at this cost for the next 4 years. So we went ahead and did that. We're not obligated for 4 years, but that option is there for us to go ahead and pick this up if we're satisfied. And so far, we have been satisfied. But, we did bid that out, and it's just there for you.
Okay, thank you. I want to jump in here real quick. Folks from Hewlett Spencer, you guys have, been here to enjoy this 3-hour extravaganza. Do you have anything that you'd like to say, or we'll just wish you a happy Thanksgiving? You really need to find a new hobby.
And Mr. Fulbright, I was actually, about to bring them up being here because the next thing on the agenda is the updated policy 3.211. We sent this out as an email this week to the folks that had volunteered to be on our policy committee. And we think that this is hand in hand with the next item, which is the zoning, proposal. 3.211, is new project planning. We have spoken during retreats both about, possible future buildings that would be built and possible expansion to current facilities. And one of the things that has kind of gone around with you guys is the number that we put on schools. And, when we build a new school, what are we building to? A minimum, a maximum type of thing. We looked at this policy and we think that next month I'm gonna bring to you, and it was on our timeline to do it this month, but we needed this kind of maybe decided, we're gonna bring a 5-year building plan to you next month. And these numbers actually play some, role in what we bring to you as far as a proposal. You can see we did strike through the numbers that were in the old or in the current policy and gave you examples of what we thought we would like to see, and we divided it out a little differently. We looked at expanding schools, because that's been a conversation for you guys, and what was feasible if we did expand a school. But then we also looked at new construction, and we know that at some of our current sites, we can't expand up to what we could build on a new building. So we gave you some numbers on those two, and we bring that to you tonight for your discussion, because as we move into zoning and as we move into that 5-year plan, we think that this is directly tied to it, and would play a role in what we bring you next month.
Okay, is there any discussion specifically on the policy, not necessarily building new buildings at this point, but the numbers that are presented? Mr. Sims.
Just a clarification, so, just to use Baker Elementary, for instance, if we wanted to build some classrooms on the Baker Elementary, you're saying the minimum student standard, I think their current capacity would be 330.
They're at 380 right now.
380.
Yeah.
So we would have to build 320 additional capacity classrooms, or to add the capacity up to 700.
Yes, and at Baker specifically, it's a little, that's the unique one, because we have an architectural plan already. Mr. Spencer can speak to this, that they did when Battle Creek was developed, in which we actually have a plan already drawn where we tear down part of Baker and actually build a whole new building beside it. But if we were going to expand that, if we said this current facility was going to be expanded, what we would do is set a minimum of we're going up to 700, and if we can't, then we're not going to expand it. But if we were going to, say, tear down part of that building and build a new building on that site, then we would say our minimum would be 850. So it would be looking at where we are with that. And again, these are numbers that we put on there to start the discussion, but it would be very much so if we expand Brown Elementary, we know we're expanding to 700. We're not going to expand to 500 and in 3 years say, well, can we do it again? We're going to go ahead and get that up to a number that we see that it's worth that expansion and it's worth putting that effort into maintaining that site. And if it's not, then we move away from it and we look for a new site.
Does that answer you?
It does. It just seems like we're really confining ourselves a little much to me. I like the 500 number better because we do have several schools, elementary schools, that are, I mean, it's just gonna completely eliminate expansion on several schools, I would think, in the future.
We feel like that elementary wise, we don't feel that Highland Park or Riverside could be expanded even up beyond where they are. Riverside's already over 500. It would be hard to push it up. Highland Park, it's at what, 370, and that's where Highland Park is. What we did was look at two things. A lot of discussion has gone into small schools. Part of the discussion surrounding the existing McDowell site was the cost to build a 500 student building. Now, expanding a building isn't the same cost as building a new building, but it sort of works the same way. If we're only going to expand a building up maybe 100 to 120 seats, the cost for that expansion is substantially more than if we go in and we lay a footprint for per student, more per student than if we go in and we lay a footprint for 250 students or 200. It just is, because the more work you do, the cheaper thing, you know that. So what we looked at was a lot of, and again, the guidance has been, you've not specifically said small schools, but a lot of our conversation and guidance has been around some of the issues that we are experiencing with these small standalone elementaries right now. So that guided that. And again, these numbers are just an example of what we think the policy would move to.
Did you say that you would be bringing this back to us, or do we need to take action on this in December?
We would like, it would be better in December so that at the December work session, we could finalize and bring you the 5-year plan.
Okay, so we will put this on the board.
I know when you first look at those numbers, they seem high, but I think we've got to realize in elementary, so if we adopt this and so we're going to build a new elementary school for 850 kids, we're never going to be at 100% capacity.
No.
So that gives us room to be at that 650 number or whatever it is if we're trying to hit that BEP number without being at capacity. So I just wanted to kind of point that out.
And the BEP number of 660 did play into part of that decision because that's when your funding changes for BEP.
Thank you. Mr. Moore?
And I get, probably the most important thing here for me, and the reason I know I was looking for this, is not the specific numbers, it's that so that you guys can start to actually plan. And we're not winging it on every single school we end up having something come up with, which has been a frustrating point that I've run into. Every year, every time we have an issue at one school, we're having to basically start from scratch and figure out what we're going to do next. So I love that this gets us in a direction where a lot of pre-planning can go on the central office side, where you guys can start to bring us things that are based on the parameters we've set in policy. And then you guys are a little more focused and you're not wasting energy on things that just aren't going to happen.
Can I say too, when we struck through and amended or kind of edited that portion of it, the first section of this policy is selection of an architect. And that is something that Mr. Spencer and I have had quite a bit of a little talk about, is looking at what we've done in building a new building versus expanding buildings. That may change what we look for in an architect. So we went through this whole policy and we didn't amend it, but I want you to know that we did look at it fully, and we're having discussions about, some folks are better at coming in and taking a building and expanding it and being good with it, and it's not the beautiful building that they made from ground up, and some folks like pretty buildings that they completely control. So we looked at this, and again, we brought this just as an action item for you guys to make some sort of decision.
Then we will put it on the board meeting for December and take action on it then, but it will not go under the consent agenda at this point. Zoning plan.
Zoning plan, your attachments for this are in two different groups, and actually there are more than that because we put some reference maps and things on there. But I hope that you saw for each one of these plans, we gave you maps. The other thing that we did was, we tried to provide you numbers statistically and then some graphs on what things would look like, because sometimes the number looks like it grows pretty greatly, but when you look at it on a graph next to one another, it's not that dramatic. On this sheet, the school enrollment numbers, you will see the numbers that are in the first part, are actual numbers, and you have that there of where we are right now, in our buildings, and this was as of November 6th. Where the numbers are, it says 8/11, but we actually pulled them on November 6th with the numbers. And we used the numbers for that to push through. The charts that you see in addition to that, where you see timelines over the last 5 years, November 6th was the date pulled for all 5 years. So that consistently at one point in time, we looked at Joseph Brown Elementary for 5 years in a row on that day, and that's where it stood. And then we brought the two proposals. We have Proposal 1 and Proposal 2. We recommend Proposal 2, and the reason we have two proposals is, one, sometimes we like to see what things look like through a different lens. Proposal 1 was the first proposal that Dr. Marzak asked me to prepare last fall. We went in and just reassigned the numbers to it and looked at where it was. Proposal 2 was really where we learned from what we did in Proposal 1 when we looked at numbers over the course of a year and how they shifted, and then we came into that. If you see for options 21, 22, under Proposal 2, we would put no elementary school in the city of Columbia at above 85%. Riverside would be at 85%, and in fact, Highland Park would drop to 77. Woodard would be at 79, and this is an intentional thing. We were trying to leave room for pre-K if that became still a topic and we need to move them. If a building like Howell suddenly needs classrooms, we've left space somewhere like Highland that we can move a pre-K. I've had talks with Ms. Ventura about standalone special ed programs and things like that. So we're building options into Proposal 2 that would allow for those classrooms to exist within that proposal. One thing you will not see, and we talked about, was 5th grade moving back to elementary. And the reason being, we can absorb the numbers. We can't absorb the number of standalone classrooms that 5th grade requires. It's one thing to absorb 100 or 150 kids at Randolph-Howell, and that may not be the best example since it's the biggest building. Let's say Riverside, you can absorb 100, 125 kids, but when you absorb standalone classrooms, if you absorb them K4, they just kind of fit in and they mesh in. But when you have to pull along and have standalone classrooms, we don't have enough classrooms across the city of Columbia to do that. We had mentioned Mount Pleasant already was not an option there, and then in Spring Hill, it would be something that we would do and then possibly have to move back to the middle school as time went along there. So what you see in Proposal 2 with the maps there, and we did come in and provide you an overlay map. I know McDowell is a specific question. In the reference maps, you have an overlay that has the current McDowell zone laid over where it would be Zone 2 in Proposal 2. Those students would move to Riverside, to Highland, a few to Baker, and a few to Woodard. In Proposal 1, they would go only to Riverside, Highland, and Baker. Woodard picks up a little bit in 2. The other big change in Proposal 2 that's different from Proposal 1 is that we do pull Hampshire in a little bit closer to town. You see that there, and that sets their zoned number at around 480 to 485. They currently sit at 400 with 160 out-of-zone kids. We feel like that this eliminates a huge out-of-zone discussion. We've had discussion about the outlier, and we see that we can zone kids there, and this actually becomes a standalone zone, a K-12 standalone zone, that we don't constantly have the question of, why are you running a school that only has 200 kids in its zone? So we looked at that and felt that that was worth that conversation. Plus, the other thing it does two things. One, it falls more consistently with Santa Fe and Culleoka on how close it comes to the city of Columbia, and it alleviates some students from the city of Columbia schools. which we know we're gonna need space. We have growth coming in the Woodard zone, we have a ton of growth coming in the Riverside zone and in the Randolph-Howell zone. While Riverside's at 85% in proposal 2, it's still the one I'm the most worried about because of the Countryside Village expansion from 325 units up to 600. In proposal 1, they go to Baker, and we couldn't handle that because Baker cannot handle the growth if it grows the way that we feel that it will. So we moved it around. We've kind of got some issues we still see, and that kind of this process has verified to us that if a future building is built, it's a Northside Columbia school. So we still see, and it played out the same way, but I do feel, and the folks at the bus garage that have been working on this with me feel, proposal 2 gives us time, whereas proposal 1 probably is something we're gonna have to look at and fix pretty quickly. Proposal 2 gives us some space and some time. So we've had conversations with folks. One thing that is consistent between the 2 proposals is that we did rectify the Mount Pleasant situation, and we did make the Mount Pleasant Elementary zone the same zone as the middle school and the high school, which has been probably going all the way back to the last rezoning, the biggest thing we felt we needed to do. So it does make them one contiguous zone. It does spread around. We did not include information on free and reduced numbers, but Mr. Parkhurst and I worked through this yesterday, and then I've been in the system looking at it. We feel City of Columbia is so compatible from school to school about where their numbers are that we've got a 3 to 5 plus or minus on any change that we see. We don't think that you're gonna see a school whose free and reduced numbers shoots dramatically through the roof and one that drops. We think it will be consistent with that. So in looking at that, the other thing that we did, and I'll stop and take questions on elementary before we look at the high school option. The other thing that we did was we started pulling some areas, neighborhoods, and seeing where their kids actually go to school. They may be zoned for one school, but when you pull the neighborhood and you start clicking on the children, we see that they actually go to a different school. In proposal 2 and in proposal 1, but proposal 2 specifically, Santa Fe would pick up some kids out at Williamsport, not a lot, but a few. A lot of them already go out of zone to Santa Fe. Some of the kids in the Hampshire group already go out of zone to Hampshire. The Woodard zone changes dramatically across the south side of Columbia, but when we pull the Claremont neighborhood, they already go to Woodard. So while it looks like you're changing that zone dramatically, you're not doing as much student change as you may think, because a high percentage of those neighborhoods are already taking their students to somewhere else. So we tried to fix some issues and make it more congruent with that. In looking at the McDowell zone specifically, the natural, and we've talked about, is to go to Baker, to Highland, and to Riverside, just because of the proximity. And in both proposals, you'll see that's kind of what we did with that. So, elementary-wise, that's a lot of information we can give to you.
Let me jump in, because we do have
yeah.
some questions. Ms. Irvin?
Yes, thank you. I was just looking at these numbers, and from my memory, which is dangerous, I used to believe that Santa Fe, I thought, was closer to 600 kids, so that made me generate the question that, of course, I could have been in error. But does these numbers, do they currently reflect the kids that are on remote learning? That's one part of that. And 2, maybe the ones that are enrolled in virtual academy currently.
Well, 2 things. One, if you look at this sheet on the left side, the number of students, and you can see for Santa Fe, the number is 512. That's their actual enrollment as of November 6th.
Including remote.
Including remote. Please remember that Virtual Academy is a standalone school.
Okay.
So if they enroll in Virtual Academy, they are no longer a student at Santa Fe or any other student. They are a Virtual Academy student.
Sure. So, and my next question is, with these future projections, based upon the modifications to the rezoning map, do these still take into account the kids that are perhaps maybe grandfathered into the out of zone? I mean, are they not? So are we going to be?
So what you're looking at on that chart is the 512 for Santa Fe are the students that are at Santa Fe right now. And remember, last month we provided you the chart that showed how many students were out of zone to a school and how many students were out of zone from a school. Santa Fe, I don't remember specifically, I can push, but like at Culleoka, there are 62 kids that go to Culleoka out of zone. but there are 65 kids that leave Culleoka and go somewhere out of zone. So we have those numbers, but the number on the left is the actual number of students that are there right now. Future zoning always works this way. I can draw a zone, and I can tell you how many students live in that zone. How many students, and it's an attendance zone, how many students are zoned attendance-wise to that school. Out of zone numbers change.
Sure.
So what you see is, let's say we move Hampshire to that 480 number, they obviously don't have the capacity to take 160 students out of zone. They can't do it anymore. So you can't grandfather in 160 kids. Now, she may have, Miss Kathy may have the ability to take up to a certain number of students, but in any rezoning, you can't account for where out-of-zone kids fall because they are year to year. You can only account for how many students live in that attendance zone, and then the out-of-zone takes place in the spring with that request.
So perhaps I'm, again, mistaken, but I have been reading a lot over the last few days trying to keep abreast of everything that's going on tonight, which is overwhelming. But I thought that I read our current out-of-zone policy states that the kids are grandfathered in until the end of their, completion date. So I took it as...
Out-of-zone is a year-to-year.
It is year-to-year?
It's a year-to-year.
Okay.
And it is based upon a room, as they used to say, room at the end. And when I was a principal, I looked at, and Mr. Lane's here, he can complete me, I looked at attendance, I looked at grades, I looked at discipline, and I looked at how much room I had at my school. And if like I was at Cox one year, we had 512 kids, we rezoned the next year, we had 780 kids. Obviously, I couldn't have the capacity to take as many out-of-zone kids that next year, because that's just the way that works. But out-of-zone is always a year-to-year. There's no grandfathering of anyone.
Okay.
Unless the board says,
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna change that policy, but the current policy is a year-to-year.
Like I said, I've read a lot. It may have been an old edition, like I said, but if you say it's wrong, I completely trust your word for that. Next question is, you mentioned there's no way to ever, with this rezone map, to put fifth grade back in elementary.
Not with our current facilities.
Okay. The only way to do that would be a future expansion.
Either expansions on multiple buildings or a new standalone building. But what you will see, and I think I've mentioned to you this on the Saturdays, what we're seeing is you really would take 2 City of Columbia elementary schools to move fifth grade, because the first one's gonna pick up your growth that you're seeing on your north side and out towards Mount Pleasant. As those numbers begin to change, we've got developments coming on Montana Road, Ashwood Manor's going to expand. We've got Countryside, which is expanding currently. Polk Place, Taylor Landing, we've got zones off of Tom Hitch that are expanding pretty regularly. So the first elementary, or the first wave of expansion, would be to absorb growth. It would either be a second new facility or a second wave of expansion that would be able to move that fifth grade.
Perhaps this may not be an appropriate question right now, but I know you guys are really great about keeping up with the county commissioners, and I know, like you say, it's gonna take a couple of years to get new facilities built, but is that something you think they're still, is that in our timeline? Do we know?
I would defer to Doug on borrowing capacity, which right now is not much, but over the coming years, in our current state with the current tax rate and where we are, Doug, am I safe to say our borrowing capacity is 0 right now? So no, there's not an immediate, without them raising taxes in order to build a new facility.
Even with the sales tax, still didn't
Even with
cut it? Okay. All right, and then the last thing, and this is something that you and I can talk about, individually later on, but I don't want to be blindsided with these. I'd like to know, especially those impacted in my zone, who's going to be, pulled out of those zones. So,
correct.
Yeah.
And what you see is the majority of your zone has no change.
Okay.
Santa Fe would pick up some kids, Spring Hill Elementary,
Sure.
Is staying the same for now. So you wouldn't see much change to that. It would be more the in-town, Ms. Parker's zone, Ms. Kinser's zone would see some, Mr. Fulbright's, they would be the ones that would, under this current rezoning would see the most change, just because it's focused on City of Columbia.
All right, that sounds good. Then we will move this to the board meeting, and we'll have the two options that we can choose from at the board meeting.
Do you care to, and I'll move on to the high school options, and I am not bringing a recommendation on high school, but I wanted you to see a couple of things. We've talked about the need for high school seats, so I'm gonna show you this, and then I'm gonna complicate it in conversation, but I didn't want to not bring it.
Complicate it shortly in conversation.
I will, I promise. If you look at the map, we have a map for Central High School and two areas of expansion. One is the Shantae Acres area that's this hot pink right to the top. That is the area from Polk Motel basically to Speedway over to Theta Pike. Okay, that Shantae Acres neighborhood, that would be an option. And then the second thing, and we looked at this the last time we worked on zoning, is basically south of Bear Creek Pike, that would run all the way to the Marshall County line out Sal Mill and pick up against Culleoka. Both of those areas used to be zoned to Central High School, and we can move, if you see on those charts, any one of them moves about 55 kids, and both of them together move a little over 100 kids to Central. That does free up a little bit of space at Spring Hill High School as an option. One thing that's complicated that, though, since then, and Mr. Pointer and I have had pretty lengthy talks, is that since we came up with this option, TSSAA has realigned for the next 3 years, and Spring Hill and Central both fall into Class 5A. Is that right for football? Both fall for 5A. This change would push Central High School to the very top of Class 5A and would push Spring Hill to the bottom and possibly into 4A. Now, I know athletics don't rule the world, but angry football parents call board members. So we wanted to provide that to you just as knowledge that we have a way through zoning to free up a little space at Spring Hill. It wouldn't be a lot, but we could do it, but the trade-off is maybe upsetting some things on the athletic side. The other thing is, I provided a chart to you of the high schools, and if you look at Spring Hill High School over the last 5 years, and I may not have printed it out to have it in front of me, it's very consistent over the last 3. So while we've talked about it being full, it is full, but it's not changed in the last 3. It's been really consistently full. So you have an option of maybe just writing that out, seeing where it goes in the next year or two, or making the change, but we did feel like we needed to let you know of that option.
Will we be voting on that at the December meeting?
That's up to you as well. We just provided it.
We'll put those options out there too. Mr. Lindsey.
So, make sure I'm understanding, if we take those two areas, that pink and purple area, rezone it to Columbia Central, we're putting it in a building where we have capacity.
Yes.
Taking it out of a building where we don't have capacity.
Correct.
And even with the TSSAA rezoning, if those numbers don't change by 20%, it doesn't affect them anyways. And if I remember right, and Mr. Pointer, correct me if I'm wrong, this was only a 2-year reclassification. They only reclassified for 2 years. So if there's any heartburn, they only got to deal with it for 2 years rather than 4. But it really doesn't.
And again, we were good with the heartburn. We just wanted to make sure everybody knew about it on the front end.
I'm good with the heartburn. Our option is we go to the commission and ask for $40 million, $30 million to do something at Spring Hill High School, or we let a few football parents get upset. So I'll deal with those upset right now.
And please know that as of now, just a reminder, the out-of-zone policy has not changed. So those still would have the ability, if there was space, to apply for anything like that.
All right, thank you. Are we done with the zoning?
One more question.
Yes, sir.
Since we're talking about athletics, if we rezone those kids out, okay, because we're fixing to talk about a transfer policy. If we rezone those kids out of Spring Hill and we send them to Columbia Central, and then we turn around and we don't allow out of zone with our policy, that doesn't prevent those kids from being able to participate in sports because of something we did, does it?
Correct. If the board does it, then the students will be okay.
All right, great. Then are we set to move to the policy discussion? Policy 1.206. Who wants to take, Ms. Kinzer?
I've read the three, drafts over and over and over, and I think I've discussed my concerns about this and, you know, with all of you. And I read them over. I really think that the first draft is the one I prefer. And I'll tell you why. It gives the board chairman, which I really think that's who needs to have that authority, rather than have the board act on it when it might be personal information. It would have to be discussed among us, perhaps voted on. I think the board chairman can do that. It can be done very easily. The other thing is, the way that reads, and I'm not looking at it right now, let me get it up here, is that 3 consecutive regular meetings, and I know the other ones clearly stated what meetings meant, regular meetings, but in budget time, you could have a month where you had lots of meetings. So I would rather that be confined to just regular meetings. That would be a work session and a voting session. The chairman may exercise his or her discretion. That means that they're gonna have the only one, perhaps even that person, access as to what the circumstances are, knowing if it's beyond the control. TCA allows board members to Skype in if they're military or if they're ill, which we have offered to absent board member, and they've refused. So I think the other ones, there's a lot of good thoughts in it, but I think this one's simple, and that's the one I prefer.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll obviously have all 3 available to vote on at the meeting. Thank you for expressing those thoughts. Policy 6.206. Wants to take this one? What about 5.5? Well, I'm looking at 2 different things. 5.501, yes. This is the complaints and grievances. Do we want to move this to consent? Mr. Williver.
I believe the only issue there was, do we have to identify a specific person, or could we, just identify a position, if I'm remembering that correctly? And we did find out that we could just, refer to a position as opposed to an individual.
Okay, thank you very much. Consent agenda then? All right, consent it is. Policy 6.206.
Just a second. Are we also putting it on there, for that one? Do we need to vote on it and waive posting? Because it's a compliance issue, right?
I would prefer that you did.
Okay.
That you waive posting on that one.
Okay, then let's do that. Let's see, this address is out of zone, I believe. Yes. Is there any discussion on this? I believe there's 2 options listed. Ms. Irvin.
Well, this must have been where I got that comment from, because 13 and 14 of those line items say all approved transfers shall remain in effect until the student completes the exit grade at the school. So I took that to mean, and maybe that's futuristic, but I just want to make sure we're all clear on what we're talking about, that if a kid gets put in Hampshire, or if a kid gets put in Santa Fe, well, their exit grade at Santa Fe is 12th grade. That's the way I read that. I just want to point that out.
I believe, Ms. Lane, you basically, the exit grade that we see is
That year.
that year. They exit that year. Now, we may need to
That needs to be clarified.
need to clarify that, but that's how that's worked.
Okay, yeah, that needs to be clarified.
I think, if I can speak real quickly, is this is keeping the parent to have to reapply each year, but if you read the next sentence, it does give the options to say at the end of the year, if this is a problem, the principal has the right to do these things. So I think the clarification is, yes, the parent doesn't have to reapply every year for a zone transfer.
I would, and we can, like I said, we can talk more about this board. I think they should. If I'm gonna put forth that kind of effort. Yeah,
Well,
yeah, they need to.
but it says attendance.
Yeah,
I
that needs
just-
to be clarified.
Okay.
And not to talk out of turn, but I just wanna make sure that it says, attendance, conduct, or academic performance. So I look at, if I got an exemplary student who's no problem, then I'm gonna buy this, I just wanna address that ahead of time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Howell, is your light on?
Yes, sir. My only problem with either one of these is I have no problem with the 90% capacity of the school. Well, I do actually, because honestly, the school may be right at that number, but there may be individual grade levels that have plenty of room. So the school is at 90, but you've got fifth grade that's only at 40% capacity. They could obviously take plenty more in fifth grade. I know that there are many schools that they do look at. Some schools don't. I know some schools look at that overall number, but some schools look at individual grade levels on what capacity, and they know to do the number what they can take and can't take. So that would definitely take out all of that, and I mean, I don't know. I kind of feel like it should be a grade level decision, not necessarily an overall decision.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lindsey?
I guess I have to tend to agree with Mr. Howe. I think it should be a grade level decision, but you guys know where I stand on it. I think we need to put something in there that we, no matter what, I don't like the percentage, but, we could be at, use 48%, we could be at 48% in fifth grade, but if we allow an out-of-zone kid, it could cause us to have to add a teacher. That's the issue I have with it, is that so if there's some way we could put some wording in there that says that, we look at it by grade level, and as long as that out-of-zone, request doesn't, cause us to, you guys know how to better word it than me, but basically, so, that it doesn't put us over our, student-teacher ratio, then I would be fine with that. But, yeah, I think I agree with Chad that if we do it by grade level, I'm fine as long as we're not paying extra for teachers, adding teaching positions because of out-of-zone students.
All right, thank you. Ms. Parker?
Real quick, can I?
Go ahead.
I agree with that 100%, but this is gonna be done in March, and we don't even have final numbers by then, so the approval will be done in March. I don't know that that's, like, physically possible to determine at that point.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Thank you very much. Ms. Parker?
I have a little bit of hesitation on voting on any changes on the zoning policy right now, mainly because I think we're looking at hopefully revising the the administrative salary schedule. And one of the things that we saw the last time we went through this process with rezoning and whatnot was essentially, I think we actually got into like a recruiting issue this past year. So I just want to make sure that we have things in place and look at this almost jointly, because I'm worried about these percentages and the incentive that it provides for principals under our current system to try to recruit students to increase their pay.
Thank you. Would, Mr. Lindsey?
I can only speak for myself, but I can ease your mind a little bit. I am not voting for a administrative salary schedule that their pay is tied to student population. That, I'm not voting on a budget if we have, I will vote no on the budget, and I can say that tonight, if we still have the same administrative salary schedule. So that's just, I'm one, but if I can get 5 to go with me, then we'll.
All right.
I don't disagree with you, Mr. Lindsey, but I'm also, you are just one, and I'd really just kind of like for it to be tied up in a nice neat bow, because it's not like out-of-zone policies. If we set this in January or February, we're still looking at this stuff in March. So I feel like we still have time to, I just don't see the rush on this particular policy. I still feel like there's things that need to be ironed out from their side with what you guys said with regards to grades and adding teachers and what exactly the impact of that is.
Well, I think that we need to decide on it because it helps Mr. Perriman moving forward. Without this, he's kinda in limbo.
I will say that the proposal that I gave you on zoning is based on the current out-of-zone policy that, because I didn't know what you would or wouldn't like, or if you would adopt a new one or not. So I worked under the premise of the current policy would be what folks would be working around once those zones are complete.
Mr. Moore?
So if I understand you correctly, we don't have to make a decision on this right now. Because that's helpful, because I don't think it's settled. And to get to one of the points Mr. Lindsay made, there's kind of a creep factor in there with you get a couple of students that are allowed in this year, and it's not enough, and then once they're there, then you do add a teacher. Well, then what about the next year? I mean, it kind of one of those things that the net effect is you may only have enough out-of-zone students that now have created a position because it just kind of worked out that way. And I know that's I don't feel like we've addressed all of those yet. I think
Okay,
is the reason.
can you guys then bring us some ways to address that perhaps in form of, kind of editing one of these or even a third or another alternative?
I think what you're seeing and what you guys have came to the conclusion yourself is we have 3 policies that are all tied to each other.
Yes.
And we've brought all 3 indirectly to you. So, what we'll try to do is when we bring it back, we'll try to put them together, how each affects the other, school size to zone exemption to our, his zoning. So,
Okay.
yeah, we'll try
Thank
to
you.
get that all
Okay,
tied.
quick comment.
Yes, Ms. Kinzer.
Would it be beneficial to have in the policy, that out-of-zone can be, unless there if there's sufficient staffing, that it be in the policy if, like the example we had at Hampshire, that it would be subject to staffing capacity. I mean, I may not say it right, but
you have to be careful because a lot of that is projections, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but that is why I really would, if I'm going to push any of these, if you look at the policy without the percent, that was where I was talking, where we can put in a procedure. And I was asked to put in a percent when I was last brought this to you, but I would still highly recommend not putting in a percent, so therefore you could write that procedure for each year. Like next year, we know it's going to be a big year, we're rezoned, so we could rewrite the procedure to fit what we need.
I would
Yes.
be remiss to not say this. If you look at once you're then to an exit year, we have 13 years in some of our schools. And you could have take a lot of second graders one year, and in 7 years there's a huge boom in an area, and those second graders you took are in 7th, 8th grade, and now they're pushing you over.
I think that was the thing we want to clarify, that's
year,
not the case.
Yeah, the year.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So where do we want to go with this? You guys gonna bring us some differences? You gonna bring us these and present one as the favorite, or where?
What we'll do is try to wrap all this up together with the zoning, with the out-of-zone, and with the school size, probably bring it like a package, and then we'll present what we would recommend. Is that fair?
At the board meeting in December, or do you need to?
Okay, so with that one brought, then we can bring the other one. And I will tell you, I will write those recommendations on the zoning out-of transfer, but I would highly recommend that the one written without percent can check those boxes, what you guys are saying.
Okay. Ms. Irvin, and then we're gonna move on.
All of this makes my head hurt because it's just like I'm looking at all these hypothetical numbers.
My head's been hurt for 3 hours.
But, I'm sorry. What I was trying to say is I really want us to be prepared for the fallout because I really think if we tell 143 kids they can no longer go to Hampshire or whatever the number is, I really believe you're going to have a big percentage of that move to private. Same thing with several of the unit schools, could be with even some of the other schools. I understand sticking within it, but I think it's a lot to digest. The same year we do a rezone, it's like we're moving kids there and pushing other kids out, and that's a huge concern for me.
Thank you. Ms. Parker?
Sorry. If you are in favor of doing the one without the percent, can you include the procedures that are written up? And I only say that because based off of what we saw with the webinar today, we often assume that procedures are coming in behind our policies, and that obviously was not the case for the last 5 years in a lot of areas. And I just don't want us to get into a situation where we approve a policy with the expectation that there's a procedure and the procedure never gets done, when really the procedure is what's driving the decision that we're making on the policy.
Thank you. All right, so you guys have your direction you're headed with that. Policy 6.304, student discrimination, harassment, bullying, cyberbullying, and intimidation.
That was the one that we did not have listed at all, that we were told that we have to have it in our policy. So I presented it earlier, and it was, once again, goes back to Mr. Wolfer's research. What we were able to do is we can have it where we don't name a person, name a position. However, with this one, you do have to have an email attached to it, so they were okay if we just created one in the district and gave our Title IX coordinator those rights. So our email will be title9coordinator@murrayk12.org.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any discussion on this one? If not, we'll move it to consent. And waive.
No, if you would, keep it on the agenda
Okay.
where you can waive policy and
Let's
get that.
let's keep it on the agenda then. Policy 6.3041, Title IX, sexual harassment, same discussion? Well, that's kind of why I was confused. Wasn't there one right before that?
I apologize. The 6.304 was the one that was also that we were looking at to get back into compliance, and it also was listing positions. I did a board edit where I did a strikeout, so you guys were able to see that. It's been from the last time. So
Okay.
it is now in policy per the TSBA, talking with Jake
Okay.
and everybody.
Just put it on the regular agenda so we can waive, okay. All right. Post proposed policies of required amount of time, anything there?
Just a side note, Mr. Chairman, we talked about the policy review. The instructional staff has reviewed their section of the November policies that were up for review annually. So whenever, I don't think we can get back on schedule with December being short, but we can start with, if the policy committee is ready with reviewing those that are ready for November. We'll try to get through the December ones, and if you want to set up a meeting later on in December before we get out, we could get those ready for you too, for review.
We could convene that through Zoom, couldn't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, we'll try to get, I know we're ready with the November ones. Do you want to go through it would be all of section 4 if we, not all of them, some of them we're recommending no changes. But we haven't done the second half of them yet because they're up in December. So we can do it either way. We can come to you and say, hey, we're ready for a Zoom meeting with all of section 4. We can send out a list of policies that we say no change, and then only have the policies that we're recommending some changes for on a Zoom meeting.
How's it been done in the past?
Or send the recommended changes to you prior to the Zoom meeting, and then we sit down and discuss them.
That would probably be the most effective,
Okay.
I would imagine.
It would probably be later in December then after we'll do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good. Instructional low bids, purchases over $10,000. Mr. Gaines. Is there anything on here that we need to be notified about?
No, the Safeware, we found out because it was, the Safeware purchase in itself was over 10,000, we had to rebid it, so
Okay.
that's what that, Safeware is about. That goes with the computers that we just bought, the Dell computers.
Okay. Are these good to go on consent? All consent.
Okay. The McCrail, Mr. Hickman, wanted us to really look at some principal training, that would take place over the next few years. This McCrail training is the first part of that. We would, do some initial Zoom training in December, follow up with, subsequent meetings in the spring, also at the same time train some facilitators, and these would be paid with, Title II funds.
Okay. Is that good as well? All right, EESI MOU.
This is an MOU with the county that both, Mr. Wolliver and Mr., excuse me. That Mr. Wolliver and Mr. Murphy have looked at. What this basically says is that the county is borrowing the ESI money to pay for the lighting project on our behalf, but through the guaranteed savings, it will be paid back through our budget. And that's how we've done these paybacks in the past. The savings each year will pay for, the payment for the next 13 years.
Okay. Mr. Lindsay?
How are those savings recognized? I mean, what I'm getting, I wanna make sure that they're guaranteed savings, that we receive those and we don't.
We will. We'll receive them just, in what they do is they guarantee that our energy costs for these projects will save this much on our bill each year. And then in turn, that money that we've already budgeted
Right, I get
will
that,
be sent to pay.
but my question is, how do we know that their equipment is doing what they say it'll do?
All right, part of that you see is the MVR, is that the proper, if that's the proper, wording in there for that, through the measurement and verification that we do through Train, and that's where they issue us every month, where if we had stayed with the old fixtures under each rate, what that bill would have been versus where we are with the changes that come through there. And it shows us that. We issue that most months. We give you a packed agreement, and it shows the guaranteed savings, and then also any savings above that.
And I apologize, I haven't read through every bit of it, but, I assume that if there's some shortfall, they absorb that.
Yes.
Any other discussion on the MOU? Seeing none, are we good to put that on consent? All right, we will. Microsoft Intune purchase.
I tried to be as thorough as I could in the memo, but just basically what this is, one of the biggest challenges we have with remote learners and staff is that if we have updates we have to do, these laptops do not have administrative rights, so even if they want to install a driver or something that's really good, they can't. We can go in individually and install updates and make changes. This would allow us to do it en masse. And so, we actually reduced 2 software packages to, and we will not be renewing those to help fund this, because we do not know how long, obviously, we'll be in this situation, but this is something that would really help us out.
Any discussion? Consent? Okay, consent. 4.5, kids on stage. Mr. Hickman, can you give us an update on that?
We had a meeting that was scheduled, and, due to technical difficulties, they canceled it on us and said they would reschedule us again, so that's kind of where we're at with that. However, I did go ahead and include those descriptions to make sure you had those. I think I did that at a prior meeting too.
Yeah.
So Mr. Fulbright and myself, we're waiting on them to see when they can schedule again, but we both tried to get on that meeting and it just failed, and so instead of trying to do a phone meeting or whatever else, they just said, we're canceling it.
Okay, so we can move that to the December work session then. Maybe.
Depends if they wanna have a meeting before then, but we'll keep requesting it.
Well, no, I'm assuming we're gonna have a meeting or else we're gonna vote something.
Yeah.
All right, we'll, do that December work session. Oh, Mr. Moore.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I really wanted us to have an answer and decision on this, and I wanted it to be before January, which is what we're looking at now, I'll be honest. I didn't wanna just keep dragging this out, so.
Okay, thank you. Any other Ms. Parker?
Can we leave this on there, just because I feel like Mr. Moore does? I feel like this has gotten drug out, for a while, and if staff has a plan for how they see it going forward and they wanna keep it, I'm okay with that, but I do think that we're at that point where if we wanna exercise that 30-day termination clause, I mean, we're pushing this into next year to take care of something that we've been talking about for years.
Okay. It's fine, we can leave it on the meeting, we'll vote it, 2 weeks from now. All right. Any other FYI information we need to discuss? If not, we will reconvene in 2 weeks for our regular meeting. Don't clap. This has been a disaster. All right, we're adjourned.